Good morning.
So Lita is actually with Hotel Indigo right here in Tallahassee in College Town. So I know she's hired a lot of Dedman students. Some of you may be familiar with the property, a great partner for the Dedman College. And we also have Willie Wingfield here today.
Good morning.
He is with Republic National Distributing Company. So one of the largest distributing companies, if not the largest in the country.
Yeah, we're the big boy on the block.
Big boy. Yeah. So lots of you I know are interested in beverages, especially now that we have our beverage certificate, which is sponsored by our NBC. So please give them a round of applause and a nice welcome. And I will turn it over to you.
Clicking or
Good morning, guys. Thank you guys for being here again. Like she said, early morning. I was never a morning person, so thank you guys for giving us your time. Like she said, I'm Lena. I'm actually a Dedman alum from 2018, so it wasn't too long now where I was sitting in your shoes, probably like 4 years ago exactly. So I've kind of stuck around, stayed in Tallahassee. My background is all hotels. I started off as a front desk agent, moved my way up to a supervisor, then was like, I'm kind of interested in housekeeping, did that. So then my background is definitely rooms 100% before I was given the opportunity to be the assistant general manager and open up Hotel Indigo. So that's just a little bit about myself. We'll go a little bit more in detail, but we'll go ahead and take it over for Willie.
My name is Willie Wingfield. I am a regional training manager for Republic National Distributing Company, and my path to this position has been, I was telling them earlier, started out, I was a political science major. I am a graduate of Florida State University, so proud alum standing up here this morning in front of you. Thank you for the opportunity. But yeah, I went from working for state government to where I am now. So one thing as we walk you through things today, we will show you your path in life changes. So be flexible and be open to the opportunities that are given you as you choose your career and go through your career path in life. So just be flexible and be willing to take a chance and bet on yourself. That's what I did, and I've been with my company 19 years. I love it, passionate about being here in front of you today, and just passionate about most things in life. So just make sure you have passion with whatever you do. Alrighty.
So the right way to be picky. So with this, when you're looking for your first steps, your first internship, which is what pretty much all of you guys are looking for, getting ready for the summer, be picky. This is like your experience, and only you can limit yourself. So do your research, look into your companies, look at locations where you kind of want to spend for your summer. If you're not from Florida and you're like, oh, I kind of want to stay, go to South Florida, get away, like look into that, look at what your options are. So do your research. We were talking about this earlier, like you have so much at disposal, especially here at the Dedman School University. Like you guys have your professors to talk to that have so many connections, have gone through this. Look and do your research and reach out to people, start asking some questions.
Yeah, so when you're, take that opportunity to be picky about what you want to do. So when you're a, freshman, sophomore, make sure you're starting to wrap your mind around, picking, what you want to do. And by the time you get to your junior, senior year, you should already be locked into that career path, that career focus you have. But, take that opportunity early in your college years, your freshman, sophomore years, to figure out what you want to do. Those are the years where you can kind of like hop around a little bit, like, I might be interested in this, I might be interested in that. But by the time you get to your junior, senior year, you need to be razor locked in focus on what path you want to take, because that's going to put you in front of the, my company, Indigo, wherever, you want to have that focus by the time you get to your, junior, senior year. So you know who you're speaking to at the information sessions, at the career fairs, the career expos. You want to make sure you're speaking to the right companies and you're not wasting your time, speaking to, if you're interested in beverage, but you're talking to the CIA or FBI or something like that, because they always have the long line at the career fairs, right? Like everybody wants to be the CIA agent, and you get in there and you realize like you're an analyst, you're not the TV person with the gun and chasing after the crooks, you're the person like sitting in front of the computer trying to track them down, and that's not as fun as you thought it would be, right? So make sure you know what you want to do. Locations. So, you need to be picky about your locations as well. So if you don't like cold weather, don't be looking for opportunities in Montana, if you don't like cold weather. You need to know, are you a big city person? Are you a small city person? What are the locations for the company that you're talking to? Like my company, we're in 38 states plus DC. But if you're interested in one of those states where we're not, you need to know that information before you come to our table, because, if you're talking about a state we're not in, there's not a lot I can do for you unless you're flexible to relocate to a state where we conduct business. So just keep that in mind as far as that.
And like Willie said, definitely be flexible. Don't cut yourself short. I remember saying oh, I'm only ever gonna live in Florida and stuff like that. But some of the opportunities you guys get and some of the offers are phenomenal. So don't get uncomfortable a little bit about it too. Like you said, don't shoot yourself in the foot and be like, oh, I hate the cold, and accept something where you're gonna be unhappy. But get yourself a little bit uncomfortable with these locations. There's so many, he has so many opportunities and so many in the nation, Hotel Indigos, hotels are everywhere for you guys. But be conscious. So my biggest thing is I love the East Coast, and I was willing to stay anywhere on the East Coast because I prefer the weather over here compared to the West Coast. So open your horizons a little bit, but do your research, do location search. Oh, is it a big city? Is it really a big city? Do you know about it? What does that look like for you guys? And again, location especially with being a FSU alumni, Chicago's Alumni Center is amazing. So you're not going to be alone if you go to Chicago. You'll meet and network there. And like you said, when you're going and talking to these companies, if you're not fully there, they always talk to you guys about oh, connections, networking, get to know people. But at your expo fair, that might not be the time. They're looking for you guys who are interested in them.
We have a great alumni network in Atlanta. I was in DC a couple of years ago. Watching a football game. We have a great network in the DC area as well. So take advantage of those opportunities. You can Google everything these days. Google the Seminole Club of whatever major city. I belong to the one in Orlando. It's great. Game days, you get to connect, because one thing, and we'll get into it later, in some of the other slides, but building your life, if you do relocate, that's a good opportunity to connect with fellow Knowles, and you might move somewhere and you might not know anyone. You might not have, the spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend or something traveling with you. It might just be yourself. So that's a great opportunity to build a network and connect with people to where you'll have something to do and you'll have that work-life balance. So just keep that in mind. The location thing, just to go more in detail on that exists within my company right now. When you apply for certain positions, they want to know if you're relocatable or not, or if there's certain opportunities that come up, we have to know, on our talent profile within our system, I can go in there and say whether or not I'm relocatable or not. So if someone's interested in me for another position in our company, they can tell just by my talent profile within our system at my company if I'm willing to relocate, and I can put what states or what cities or what areas. So it follows you through your career. So just make sure you pay attention to that. Contact information. We're just talking about networking. Just like today, once we're done here, students reach out to me all the time. I help you as much as I can. I'm not a hiring manager, but I will do the best I can to help you. I've assisted some students recently with, reaching out to the hiring managers and letting them know, hey, I spoke to them at the Career Expo. I spoke to them at the interview skills workshop, things like that. Anything you can do to make yourself a better applicant, because it's an applicant tracking system that your resume or application goes into at a lot of companies. So anything you can do to help yourself stand out versus the other applicants, and if it's reaching out to me, or reaching out to someone else that you've come across at a career expo, make sure you're leveraging that opportunity to get the most exposure you can get for yourself in order to get that job. Letters of interest. You don't really see this a lot So we're probably not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but you really don't see that one a lot, but you can, reach out to, the person that you've gathered their contact information and let them know that you're interested. These days, it's not going to be a true letter because no one's mailing anything. Like if you were to mail me something, my office is in Tampa. I live in Orlando. So the odds of me getting a physical letter from you would be very, very slim. And by the time I got it, you might already have a job. So somewhere else. So emails, LinkedIn, I'm a big supporter of the LinkedIn connection. I guest spoke at some classes up here in September, and I can't tell you how many students came up to me after and like, hey, can I connect with you on LinkedIn? And throughout the day, my phone was just pinging with students just like connecting with me on LinkedIn, and I encourage you to do that. You can do that with me. Today, I'm okay with it. Send a connection link in. I'll answer it. Also, I didn't bring business cards today for a reason because I know a lot of business cards end up like that. But I do have a QR code where you can scan it on my phone, and it gives you my information if you want that as well. So.
Yeah, I agree. Like, you guys know the industry and how things are moving with technology. Like, LinkedIn is a great supporter of that. So, like, instead of sending or emailing a letter of interest, like both of us do get a lot, like we talk to a lot of people, so like our emails are definitely flooded, especially day to day, depending on what we're doing. But LinkedIn's a great way to just be like, hey, thank you for your time. Like, I loved what you said about this. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I didn't really get to like talk to you one-on-one because I had to run to a class, but like, those things are nice. We do appreciate that. We love the interaction. And again, the biggest thing is like if we can help you answer questions that you may be like wondering about the industry, like, hey, I want to dabble in this, but I don't know much about it. Can you tell me? Can you help me? Like, it's been great. I love working with you guys on those items because like all of us have to learn about something somewhere. So like, it's great. Use us for that.
Yeah, just make sure you're organizing your contact information as well as you connect with the different companies, throughout your, freshman to your senior year. Just make sure you're organizing it, and you can organize it based on levels of interest, right? So if you're interested in my company, you might want to slide us up here. If you're not so interested, we might be in the middle. Just depends on what career path you choose to take. One thing that I'm able to do for all of you is like open your eyes to what my company does. I work for a distributor. We're the middle person, in the 3-tier system. So a lot of people don't know like we exist in the hospitality world. So there are opportunities within my company that you might not have known, like if you had not attended something like this today, or if you don't attend the information sessions or the career expos, like I do within the hospitality world, and that's why I'm here today. And it gives you like another opportunity within the hospitality industry to know like we exist and we are opportunities for you. Mm-hmm. Follow-up phone calls. This is a tricky one. When you interview with someone, don't be too eager. So you're probably going to just have to read the vibes of the person that's interviewing you when it comes to the follow-up phone call. Because one thing I will tell you, don't do it the same day. Do not. I don't care how well the interview went. Do not reach out to them, the same day. Give it, like you want to send it within 24 hours like an email. You don't want to call them, but send them an email or a message on LinkedIn, make sure it's professional, no slang, no text talk, no things like that. You just want to make sure that you follow up, but do it in a reasonable amount of time. And after that interview, though, you don't want to, harass them constantly. If they tell you the hiring process is a 2-week process before they go to the next round, give it a few days or a week before you reach out to them like, hey, the interview went well, I was just wondering where you are within the hiring process, because a lot of hiring managers, if they've told you the time frame of it, they don't want to hear from you like that same day. Like if they've told you 2 weeks, give them a little bit of time, because sometimes it is a long drawn out process. Like with my company, it's normally like a 4 to 6 week process. Like you can send me the thank you email within 24 hours, but don't send me like, hey, where are you within the hiring process within 24 hours? If I've told you in the interview, it's going to take 2 weeks to get to the next round, or if it's going to take a week before we make our decision. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like a phone call for me, probably won't get it back from me. Day-to-day operations at a hotel can get a little bit tricky, but same thing, like our hiring process probably 2 weeks, because when we're scheduling even those, it's either like a Zoom nowadays, because we have to take that into consideration, or like availability on when someone could come in. So that alone takes like a week on trying to get all our applicants, giving you guys all equal opportunity to meet with us, and then sitting down and Willie could talk to us, like I have a 3-part, you meet with 3 people before we hire you, and that's just like seeing how you'd work front of house, how do you work with this manager, and seeing that personality, giving it, because not everyone you're gonna meet is gonna be your best friend. You're gonna be like, oh, that manager's like a little bit different, but we wanna give you the opportunity to meet with someone else. And then for us, our final process is always our general manager. She wants to get to know you. My previous general manager was the same way, so it's just fitting you and making sure you fit with the company, and we'll go into what cultures look like for you guys.
And no texting. Now, if the hiring manager texts you and they tell you text them back, that's fine. But on the follow-up stuff, they're not your buddies. You know, we're not your friends. You know, we might be considering you for an opportunity at our companies, but you know, no text messages. Unless if they text you and say, hey, text me back, you know, I'm thinking about scheduling a second interview at 8 o'clock. I don't know if you've gotten my email. Can you text me back if you're available Tuesday at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m.? Then you can text them back. But to get follow-up information or anything from a hiring manager or from a company, do not text them. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? Anyone? Anybody? Come on. Who's going to ask the first question today? And hopefully we can answer it. If not, there we go.
When you're sending an email, how would you address the person? Would you use their first name or their last name with it on?
That one there is a little bit tricky. I would always like address them, you know, by their like Mr. Mrs. and their last name. If they tell you, hey, you know, I'm Bob, then you can do that, you know, but I would just address them, you know, by, you know, Mr. Mrs. and then like their last name, and then they'll send you in whatever direction. Like if you came up to me and you're like, hey, good morning, Mr. Wingfield, I'm going to tell you because I like to get to know you, I'm Willie. But let me make that for you. Don't walk up to me and say, hey, Willie, remember I saw you at the, you know, expo or the interview workshop or whatever. Like, don't do that. Just lead into with the Mr. Mrs. and their last name.
I completely agree with that. I will still to this day send like everyone first, my contacts and stuff like that. Like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. And I really follow up, especially with an email, how they sign off. So like I will forever don't like Miss Herrera, like that's a little old for me. But I'll sign off saying like, oh, thank you so much, Lena. And like I feel like that's your window to be like, oh, you could, if you're gonna keep following that conversation with me, like call me Lena, that is fine. But I would agree, like 100% start with the Mr. and Mrs. and let them like direct you in that for you.
Anyone else before we move on?
Great first question.
That's a very good one, because everybody's a little bit different, right, when it comes to coming to that, but let them make that decision. You do the right thing, greeting, and then let them tell you whether or not they want to be called by their first name or, you know, I have a friend, like when people say sir to him, he hates it. He goes, I'm not sir. He goes, I have a name. My name's Jack. He always says that. So just kind of, but he's the one that's making that decision, you know, so let them do that. Alrighty, so we kind of talked a little bit about this when we were talking about being picky. So this, you know, is it a good match? You know, you want to make sure the company, and we were talking about this at breakfast this morning, you want to make sure the company's a match for you, you know, and, you know, in the Google world, always look for the values and the culture. Google that for that company or those companies that you're interested in before you sit down or meet someone at an information session or a career expo. Do your homework and look at the culture and look at the values. Like one of the things we were talking about today at breakfast, we were talking about, you know, corporate social responsibility is a huge thing, especially with your generation, right? So you can always Google that and you can see the CSR reports, you know, as you Google each company. So that way you know if their values and their culture match with what you're looking for. So, you know, that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and how like my experience has always been like if you're going into hotels and food and beverage when it comes to like front of house restaurant stuff, in hotels, like you can look up what hotels and what their vibe, I guess you would say, is. So like for Hotel Indigo, we're telling the neighborhood story. So we want you to be your authentic self. While some hotels are a little bit more corporate-y, they want, like, especially for a luxe high end, they want you to be like, you know, sir, ma'am, like, how can I help you? Like, very prim and proper. And then you have like Hard Rock, who wants you to be so relaxed with the guests to create connections like that. So look what you guys want. Like when you go into food and beverage, like what kind of food do you want to serve? What are you passionate about? Try to use that when you guys are looking for your companies, because that will ultimately, and for my experience, make you happier. If you love what you do, if you have a company that aligns with like how you are as a person, like you will get a lot further. You'll have people that kind of work alike with you. Again, you're not gonna have everyone that you work well with, but like when you're doing your research, look at their values. Like most, if not all websites have that. They talk about like what's important to them, and then bring that conversation up in your interviews too. As much as we're getting to know you guys, like ask them like what's a day in the life in your company, like how long have you worked there, and like who do you work with, and things like that. Like those are important things for you guys as well, because you won't know it until you step foot into that and see that every day, day to day.
The discover new career possibilities and options, I mean, you're young, so this is your opportunity when you're out there is, you know, to look for those opportunities that might be outside of the box. Everybody wants to work in Tampa, Orlando, Miami, Atlanta, Chicago, but what happens if I tell you, hey, I got a job in South Dakota? Are you willing to go there for a year? That might be your opportunity to let the light shine on you. So that's what that means. Like, you know, look for those new possibilities and options that are outside of the box that might get you in with that company. You know, they might not have an opening in Atlanta or Orlando or somewhere like that, but they might have an opening in another city, in another state that you might not have thought about. And it doesn't mean you can't eventually get back to the city that you initially were thinking about. Go work there for a year. Get the experience. Let the light shine on you. Become that shining star, that rising star. And then you can like say, hey, you know, I've been here a year. I've been here a couple of years. What's going on in Tampa? What's going on in Tallahassee? What's going on in Jacksonville? You know, I've seen that you have opportunities there. Can I get back to Florida? But don't be afraid to bet on yourself and look for those other options and possibilities.
Yeah, and definitely ask what that career growth would look for you. Trust me, I think most of us, if not all of us who graduate from Florida State are like, oh, I'm gonna leave right away. I've been here 6 years. So like, I'm the perfect example of like, I always said, I'm graduating, I'm moving to Boston. Did I apply to places in Boston? Yeah, but I've done a phenomenal here in Tallahassee, and I thank that for like being open to the idea of like, it's okay to like stay. And like, that was always a stigma in my classes, like everyone's moving out and leaving Tallahassee, and I was like, oh my God, I'm still here. But like, without being here and being okay with that, like, I would not be where I'm at right now. But definitely ask like, how long does it take for me to move up? Like, biggest thing like I've seen in interviews is like, how do I be a supervisor? And I'm like, I don't see anything to back you up to be a supervisor. Like, let's start with the baby steps. But like, ask those questions, like how long of a training, how long do you see most people in these positions before they move up? Or like, what is like, for hotels at least, like turnaround is very quick. So like people, different hotels will move faster. Smaller hotels, management's moving in and out, new opportunities, while a big hotel, like 1,000 rooms, your director of rooms is probably gonna be there until they retire. So looking at those opportunities and seeing that for yourself, definitely ask that.
Yeah, so that's, you know, the one thing with looking for those new possibilities and options and thinking outside of the box, it does open up opportunities like that. I stayed in Tallahassee 2 or 3 years after I graduated, when a lot of students are like, I'm done with this lifestyle. I gotta get the heck out of here and go somewhere else. But if your opportunity is here, take it, you know? I mean, you're not stuck in that position for 30 years or 10 years, but take that opportunity. If they're offering you a job or an opportunity in Tallahassee, take it. Get the experience. You can always move to another city later, but the most important thing, like when you graduate, is you want that experience, you know, that real world work experience. So take that opportunity, even if you're tired and burnt out on Tallahassee and I'm done with this city, I gotta go to somewhere else, Jacksonville, whatever, take that opportunity. And ask them questions as you're working, you know, in Tallahassee, like, hey, when are the opportunities coming for me, you know, or what opportunities will be available for me in other cities as I gain more experience, you know, with the company.
Yeah, so I had, obviously, you might have had friends too who graduated 2020 and they lost all their post-grad opportunities. I had 3 friends who lost all their post-grad opportunities and they ended up staying with me and opening up the hotel. But look at them now. One's working for the Breakers, one's in Austin, Texas. Like, they got to grow within. Got the opportunity to mold them and teach them because during COVID, we were all wearing 3 to 4 hats at a time. But they realized something that they're like, hey, one was like, hey, I don't like back of house, I like front of house operations more, and that's what he left to do. The other one got exposed to sales, and she's like, I never considered being a sales coordinator, and that's the first thing she applied to in Texas. But they let themselves grow and be okay with that.
Yeah. Build background knowledge for interview discussion. Just educate yourself, not only, building up your experience, your internships and all that, but also educating yourself on, what type of questions you're going to ask, learning about the company, all those things are important. It's all about doing research and doing your homework and coming in with a certain level of knowledge before you sit in front of that person for that interview. So they know you've done your homework, your due diligence, and that you're serious about the position and that you're not just trying to get a job, trying to get your first job. Like, you've actually done the homework because you're passionate about that position you're interviewing for that particular day. So just make sure you're, doing your homework and you're gaining as much knowledge. I'm a big person on learning, and developing throughout life, whether it's your personal life or your professional life. And I think we should all do that no matter what stage of life we're in. So just keep that in mind, because I think it's something that can benefit you throughout the interview process.
Yeah, I will say, spoiler alert for me, not my first, but the first 5 questions, one of them is definitely going to be do you know IHG? Most people don't. Most people won't know until I'm like, oh, do you know Holiday? And they're like, oh my God, yeah, of course, Pitbull sings that song. Of course I know. But they don't know the company. They don't know, or my flagship. Everyone knows about Marriott, everyone knows about Hilton. But do your research. I want to know that you are 2 feet into this more than just getting a job. I know, again, I've sat in your seats. I know you guys need hours, but anyone can sign off for those hours. I want you to grow into this professional person you want to be. I want you to leave. I know you're going to be temporary with me, but I want you to leave knowing hey, I could take any job I walk into. I've learned a little bit about this. I've learned about that. I've had front desk agents who work for 4 Seasons accounting and stuff like that. I want to be able to prep you up for those things, but give me a little bit something, know a little bit about my hotel, know a little bit about the company itself.
So I was joking, part of the, the knowledge and, for the interview discussion, I was joking earlier, when Alicia was talking, when she introduced us, that my company, we're the big boy on the block, and we are one of the bigger ones. We're the 2nd largest distributor. So if you were interviewing me and I said that to you, you're gonna be like, well, I read where you guys are number 2, right? So it's just one of those things, doing your homework to know where you're positioned in our industry. So that's, just perspective on things, things you can know by just doing your homework,
Yeah.
Gain industry perspective, just, know what industry you're interested in, know what you're diving into. If we were talking earlier today, if you want to be a beverage person or not, that makes a big difference. You want to be restaurants, front of the house, back of the house, it's things you need to know to get your industry perspective. With my company, we're a sales-based organization, but there is a lot of other opportunities. If you're an event management, person, student, we have an event specialist position. We have HR positions. We have IT. We have finance. We have operations. I'm a regional training manager. So we have different other options and things at our company. So just make sure, whatever you decide by your junior, senior year, that you're focusing on whatever that perspective is, that you've narrowed that scope. And that way you can kind of target what you're looking for by the time you get to your last couple of semesters. Any questions on that one before we?
Is it appropriate to ask questions before the interview? Showing background knowledge, asking questions before you make an interview?
You can ask questions the information sessions and at the career expos. Those are your opportunities to ask those questions. I would come prepared, Career Expo information. Like a lot of schools are doing the, not every school, but a lot of schools do the laid back information sessions. So you can ask those questions. I would come prepared, just like an interview. Like, you might not ask the heavy hitting ones, but you might have 3, 4, 5 questions. Like when you walk up to the table, I love to see students that walk up to the table, and instead of asking me like, hey, tell me something about yourself, they walk up to me and like, hey, I've read all this about you guys and I know this, this, and this. I love that. And then, they ask questions. Like one of my favorite questions I love to hear, what's your onboarding process? Home run for me. Love it. Love those questions. Love it. I love to hear what's your onboarding process, because my company takes pride in our onboarding process. We invest in you because we want you to grow with us and stay with us. So I love to hear that. I love to hear goals. Like, hey, what kind of goals do you have? Things like that. Come prepared with those type of questions. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask those questions at a career expo or anything like that. That's a good question. Anyone else? All right. Alrighty. Well, if there's one common theme we've seen in the first few slides is preparation, right? So there's just more, just be prepared, First and second interview, just make sure, continue to do your homework, and there's always more you can learn about the company, because as you learn more about the company, it might target you to ask another specific question or something, like you might, point you in a different direction to make you ask another question or write another question down that you want to ask that interviewer. So just always keep preparing. You can never be too prepared for anything.
Yeah, most definitely. Like the funny point about this whole slide is like, be ready for all interview styles. Literally be ready for all interview styles. My interview for like Lowe's, when they come over and stuff like that, at this level, it's pretty cool, pretty fun, like very easy conversation I had with them. And by the time I got to meet like my actual hiring manager, who was gonna be like my rooms manager, his first question to me was, what's 72 times 80? And I'm like, what? Like, had no relevance to what I'm about to do. But then you have people who want to see your critical thinking by putting you in the spot and making you nervous. So like, don't get too confident on like how your first interview goes to your second interview, because like, from him to I, we interview differently. So like, be prepared to like, for anything and everything when it comes to interviewing, but like have fun with it. Be on your toes for things like that. Again, his thought process to that answer was not if I got the answer right or wrong. It was, what did I do under pressure? How did I get that answer? What resources? Sales has different techniques, like sell me this pen.
Yeah.
And it's not about like, you sold it. It wasn't the goal of selling it. It's like what your thought process was to get there. What techniques did you use? Seeing like a little bit about the knowledge you guys have. So that was like pretty fun. I was like not prepared, because I was like, oh, I nailed the first two. Like, we're great. We're having fun. We're talking. And then you asked me a math question, but in the end, it wasn't about the math question whatsoever.
And, with the present the best version of yourself, like when you're somewhere interviewing, just like I'm here today, I'm not interviewing, but, I'm staying at the Indigo, like I'm representing my company. I'm the face of my company while I'm here, in Tallahassee. So I'm presenting the best version of myself, like I was, having dinner at the hotel last night, so I have to make sure like I'm on point the whole time I'm there, just because I'm representing my company. Who knows, I could have been sitting next to like one of your parents or something. They're like, oh, dang, is that the guy that was like doing all the shots at the bar last night or something like that? Like, you don't want to be that person, right? So when you go somewhere to interview, just always remember, that's an interview from the minute you walk into the door of that company. So keep that in mind. So if you're sitting in the lobby waiting, and someone passes by, from the receptionist to, you might not even know who it is. It could be a receptionist, it could be a VP, it could be like one of the people sitting in on the panel interview, but always say hello, represent yourself, just make sure that you're always on point and that you're aware of where you are, your surroundings, and just speak to everyone that, comes by or whatever. If someone's putting you up overnight before the interview, Just make sure, especially on like the restaurant hotel side, just make sure you're representing yourself the best way that you can. Don't do anything crazy. You're there to start your career. Like, I'm here to start work. I'm not here to party and, tell my friends like, man, I had the best time in Tallahassee. No, I'm here for work. I'm the face of my company while I'm here, and you're representing yourself when you're sitting there for that, job interview. So that entire time you're in that city or you're in that building, just make sure you're doing everything to represent yourself the best way that you can.
And Willie brought up a great point. I completely agree with everything he just said. Like, even turning into an application to my front desk agents, like, my front desk agents are telling me whatever you might have said over the phone or like how you presented yourself. Like, I've had some people who've called in like, I haven't heard back from them. Why haven't they called me back? And then like my front desk agents will tell me like, hey, this person was rude to me on the phone, but they're just following up on an application. Like, I probably won't call you back. I did not call that person back because you're already showing me how you'd possibly work with someone at my hotel and like things like that. So everything he said is 100%. Like, just don't be like, oh my God, like I can't walk into a front desk without handing it in and I can't sneeze. No. But just be aware, like, you're going to be talking to different people who may know people.
Yeah. I will tell you this, like, if you are waiting your turn for that interview, I would not be on the telephone, unless it becomes an emergency, step outside, because if you end up like you're just talking to a friend or a family member and you talk the way you talk and all of a sudden you start using language or you're giving out personal information, somebody might say like, did you just interview that person? Because I just heard them talking about, they just got out of jail for a DUI or, like you don't want people to know your business, right? You're trying to get a job, you're trying to start your career. So, I wouldn't even, unless you're texting or something, I would not talk on the phone if you're waiting out in the lobby, to be called next for the interview or whatever. I do it like when we sit for interviews, I don't talk to anyone and I work for my company. I was just like, I don't get on my phone. I wait, I sit there. And also part of that too is like the best version of yourself, come prepared. Like with my company, like even when I'm interviewing, even though I might know the hiring manager, I still come dressed in my suit and even though we've gotten more laid back, I still wear the tie. And I'll tell you a funny story. I was interviewing for a area manager sales spot a few years ago. And our EVP for the state of Florida, he walks in, I'm sitting in the office waiting for my turn or whatever to be interviewed because there was another candidate in front of me that was being interviewed. And our EVP is a funny guy, he's a great guy. His name's Ron Barcena. And he walks up to me and I have my tie on and everything. He goes, Willie, who died? I'm like, no, I'm here for an interview for the area sales manager spot. And he goes, take your tie off. And he goes, if they tell you you didn't wear a tie, where's your tie? Tell them the boss said, I told you to take your tie off because it's not a funeral today. So but I just wanted to be prepared. Once he told me like, hey, take the tie off, you're good. I took the tie off. And I walked in, I had my tie like tucked in here and, just kind of, we kind of all laughed about it because I think he kind of said something to them when he walked back there, because they had a couple of funny comments to make, whatever. But just always, make sure you're representing yourself. Interview styles, a lot of different interview styles. I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, like you might have a panel interview, a group interview. So that's something you want to be aware of. There might be, my company does this a lot where managers will ask other managers to come and sit in just for a different perspective. So just be prepared for that. It might not always just be a one-on-one type of situation. You might have 2 or 3 other people in there, as well. So that's just like an example of a different type of interview style. In the current COVID world we live in, virtual interviews are happening a lot. Phone call interviews are happening a lot. One thing I would tell you about all those different interview styles is prepare the same way though. Wake up in the morning, even if it's a phone call, wake up in the morning, be prepared. Have that good night's sleep. Still get dressed. I would still get dressed like you're going to an interview because that gets you in that mindset. Instead of just being relaxed and laid back on the telephone, virtual, same thing. Make sure your surroundings behind you are professional. Don't be in your car, Don't be in your bedroom with your unmade bed. If you have to do it out of your bedroom because you have roommates, make the bed, clean up your bedroom. Don't, have it facing towards the window or something, but just create the best possible situation for yourself because you are on stage. You are being interviewed. So you can't just throw up the camera, or the iPad or your phone or whatever, and the bed's unmade and the room looks a wreck, or you're trying to do it in the kitchen and somebody's trying to cook, and you gotta make sure that you're doing everything possible, to make sure that's a great interview for you. And you don't want them to judge you based on the surroundings they might see if it's a virtual interview. So just keep those in mind. Situational interviews are another one, and it's kind of asking you questions like, hey, have you ever had a difficult situation? And I know your work experiences might not be that great because you're still in college, but you can pull from social experiences. If you belong to any clubs or groups or organizations, you can use that. It doesn't always have to be work related. They might just be asking you that question to see how you manage running into a difficult situation. How did you overcome it? What was your thought process in your decision-making process? So those are just a few different types of interview styles.
Yeah, most definitely. Very situational. And like I said, we just want to see where you're coming from, what you have to say. It's not about being the perfect answer whatsoever. It's just having that conversation, seeing how you think. Especially front desk, sales stuff, you don't know what you're going to run into. No, in the hotels, no 2 days are ever the same. But it's just about seeing how you handle yourself, present yourself, conduct yourself. I will always ask, tell me about the most stressful time. And your stressful time might be this huge Greek mythology exam that you took, but talk about it. I want to hear that. I want to know what happened, how you got there, what did you do to prepare?
A legal question. So big companies like ours, you're probably not going to get anyone asking you questions like this. As sometimes the smaller mom and pop companies, they might ask you things they can't ask you, what kind of groups you belong to. That's illegal. Now, they can ask you if you belong to any trade organizations or professional organizations, but they can't ask you hey, do you belong to a religious group or anything? And this is one you kind of have to gauge for yourself. Us standing up here today, I can't tell you, I wouldn't answer the question, but if you want that job, that decision is left up to you if you choose to do that. Or if you choose to report them for asking you, they can't ask you if you're married. And a lot of employers don't even care if you're married or if you have kids. The only thing they care about is can you get to work? And they can't even ask you if you have a car. They can ask you if you have transportation, reliable transportation. They can't ask you if you have a car. They can ask you, go ahead.
How would you respond to those types of questions? If you were looking at a different job that you wanted, if you were being asked those questions, not just one or two, but repeatedly, how would you respond to the situation where they're asking questions that they should not be asking, and you maybe want to work for the company, but now that they're asking questions, it's just...
You can just let them know you're not, I wouldn't say to them that hey, you're asking me illegal questions. Just let them know hey, I'm not comfortable asking that. What does that have to do with the interview or the position I'm applying for? But yeah, you don't have to shoot back at them, hey, you're asking me a bunch of illegal questions. Just say I'm not comfortable with the questions you're asking me, and I don't understand what do these questions have to do with the position that I've applied for, because everything I've read from talking to your recruiter or your HR person or your representative at the Career Expo, the job role doesn't, me being married shouldn't make a difference. Whether I have children shouldn't make a difference. Just things like that. Our salespeople, they have to have cars, right? But we can't ask them. We just have to ask them, do you have reliable transportation? So we can't ask them hey, do you have a car? So, but yeah, if you don't feel comfortable with it, and it's always left up to you. You can answer those questions if you really want that job that badly, but that might also let you know what kind of work culture you're about to get into. So be very cautious about that. At least I would. If someone were to ask me that, even within my own company. I've been with my company, it'll be 19 years in June. If a hiring manager were to ask me that, I'll be well, why are you asking me that? I don't feel comfortable answering that question. But normally larger companies like ours, they're not going to ask stuff like that. It's more of the companies, smaller companies, mom and pops, that think they might be able to get away with it, and who knows why they're asking, because I don't think for most jobs, like, some of these questions are, who cares if I, you know, why do you need to know if I belong to a religious group? I'm gonna show up, work Monday through Friday or weekends or whatever. Why does it matter if I'm Catholic, Pentecostal, whatever, you know? So yeah, that's just left up to you on how you feel. I mean, you could proceed and answer those questions if you choose to, but you do not have to answer those questions. And you also have the right to report them if you feel that strongly about what they're asking you, especially like you said, if they're getting 3 questions in, 4 questions in on the illegal stuff, if you want to report them, you can report them. Yeah. The interview is over. Now what? Somebody tell me, what do you think you should do once the interview is over? What's the number one thing you should do once the interview is over before you walk out of that room? Yes, that's the number one. It's something that's small, but a lot of people, as a hiring manager once before, I can't tell you how many people don't do that. And it's the easiest thing, the simplest thing, and it might make the difference between that person going to the second round or not, because if they don't tell me thank you, I'm thinking like, well, they're just looking for a job. They're not passionate about it. They don't really care about it. So, you know, that's the main thing you should do, you know, is the thank you. And then, you know, earlier we were talking about the follow-up. You know, when do you send that, you know, thank you email? Because you say thank you on the way out, but within 24 hours, you want to send that thank you email. You don't ask about the hiring process, because they've probably already told you, like, hey, we'll have a decision on the next round in a week or 2. So when you send that thank you email, don't ask anything about, you know, when are you going to make a decision, because they've probably already told you that when you were sitting in front of them. Now, if you want to highlight something that went well in the interview in that thank you letter, that thank you email, do that. Like, hey, you know, I really enjoyed our conversation about, I don't know, you might have told them, you know, like you went to Hawaii and they talked to you for 30 minutes about Hawaii. You know, you might, yeah, you remember when we laughed about, if you want to throw that in there, put it in there. But don't ask anything about like the hiring process or anything, you know, like that. Another thing that's important is, you know, just make sure that you're answering emails or phone calls, you know, whatever they're sending you. Like if you're interviewing and a lot of you are going to be interviewing multiple companies, multiple opportunities, always check your voicemails. Always, you know, check your emails. And one question I'm going to ask is, how many people have their voicemail set up with a greeting? Please tell me, everybody. Everybody, please, come on, go, everybody. All right, if you do not, when we leave here today, I'm going to ask you, and I probably won't see most of you again until probably the Career Expo. And I know some of you, not all of you, are seniors, but at some point in time, you know, in your journey through FSU, I will see you again, but I'm going to ask you before you make it through the day, whether you're a freshman or a senior, please set up your voicemail. If you remember anything I told you today, you can walk out here like, that guy's crazy. Like, he's been out of college for like more than a year. I'm going to be nice to myself. Just make sure you do that for me. You know, if you see me at a career expo, information session, whatever it is, I'll be back in 2 weeks. I'll be back again in March. If you see me walking around campus or eating somewhere, like, hey, I know you don't remember me, but I set up my voicemail that day. Because that's really important, because some employers, if they call you and they just get, hey, you've reached 407, blah, 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 they're going to be like, you know, like you got to leave your name, have your name on there, not just your number, like, hey, you've reached Willie Wingfield. You know, make sure your name's on there. You know, the other thing is just make sure you have something on there. Just don't leave the factory stuff on there or don't have anything set up at all.
Yeah, completely agree. Just your name. That's more than enough. You don't have to go on this whole thing. Just, it helps us confirm like that is really who it is. We're not going to leave a random voicemail for just anyone. And like if things do change, like information, things like some people change their phone numbers, we all get spam calls, like that's a great thing to follow up on an email, like, hey, I'm gonna, like, you know, my phone number just changed, or like I've had people like go out of town, so they're unreachable, like mountains, cruises, like great things to follow up on, so we're not like, hey, this person ghosted us and then that wasn't the case, or something came up. So create that conversation with us to let us know, like, hey, I'm still interested, this is just going on. Or like, I'm going on a cruise, so you're not gonna hear from me from a week, can we follow up in this time? Because again, we're humans, we totally understand, but we won't know, and we'll just keep moving on.
And we're all adulting, right? Because and I know like we all just want to think like, oh, I've never had voicemail set up or whatever. My friends always, or my family still leave me messages. You're trying to get a job with someone that does not know you other than when they saw you at a career expo. So you want, like we talked earlier about, being the best version of yourself, being an adult and setting up the voicemail. That's being the best version of yourself as well. So just, keep that in mind. If you have any crazy stuff on your voicemail, once you start interviewing, like you might not be interviewing now because you're, freshman, sophomore, but you might be looking for internship opportunities. Get rid of the crazy voicemails, the crazy greetings. Get rid of that stuff. Like if you had something wacky on there, get rid of it, make it mainstream, because you just never know who that person might be that's leaving you that message. It might not be me. Like I might have met you and like, okay, that's just their personality, but you think about a hiring manager, whether it's for an internship or a career opportunity, they don't know you. They're just, you filled out an application, you reached out to me and I said, hey, I spoke to them at the interview skills workshop, and they move you forward. They've never met you, but they're calling you to talk to you, set up an interview. They might not appreciate the crazy voicemail greeting because it might not be their thing. So just keep that in mind too. So this is one of my fun slides, and we had a really good time. Like, we weren't late getting here, but we spent a lot of time talking about this this morning because, as you see, there's 17 on here, and we could probably talk about each one of these for a long time, but these are all very, very, very important. We talked earlier about, and we'll just go down the list, and each of us will, comment on it. The lack of career planning. We talked earlier about preparation, prepare. Just make sure that, by the time you get, like I mentioned earlier, like by the time you get to your junior, senior year, you should be locked into what direction you want to go in, like your hospitality, right? So you should know, like, do you want to come work for a distributor? Mm-hmm. You want to work for a hotel? If you're going to a restaurant, you want to be front of the house, back of the house. I mean, you need to know all that by the time you get to your junior, senior year, because you need to start getting your experience, your work experience, your internships, all that, your junior, senior year, because when you graduate, no one wants to see the person that's hopped jobs like 3 times in a year. Get that experience while you're in college, because we expect you to hop around in college because you're trying to get experience. So if you have 4 jobs in 4 years or 5 years or 6 years, that's okay. But if you have 3 jobs or 2 jobs in your first year out of college, like you don't want to be that person. So.
Yeah, and I will say, like, for an example, my first job coming up here was at my apartment complex that I worked at. Like, once you get, like how I was saying, to your junior, senior year, and you're like, hey, Lena, like, I want to go into sales, but like, I know my resume doesn't say that, but these are the skills that I learned at this job that's going to help me. And like, you're selling yourself to me. So like, even if you don't have front desk experience and you're like, but I worked at Chuck E. Cheese, and I loved greeting people, I loved following up with them and seeing how their experience, that tells me a lot more, and I will definitely be like, hey, let me be your first front desk experience for you. But explain yourself, give yourself the background. You might not have that exact job you're applying for, but with what you have so far, sell us on that career planning. Let us know, like, hey, I don't know much about event coordinating, but I did these couple of things in my organization, and this is why I think I will be the best for this position, why I feel like I'm comfortable doing this and I can knock it out of the park. But coming into an interview and be like, I don't know, like, I think I like hotels. It's fine to not know, but like, give me an idea. Let me help work with you, mold you somewhere, because like, I can't train if you don't know. Like, that doesn't help me help you at the end of the day. I could be helping someone who's like, this is what I want to do. These are my 5-step plan. Like, hey, I want to start front desk, to go into here, to go into there. I want to work at a hotel because they do have restaurants, and I do want to end up in banquets. But this is where I'm going with. That gives us something to work with, help you grow. Like, again, at least for hotels, I could say a lot. Like, I don't expect you to be at your hotel for 20 years. Like, I don't expect you sometimes even past a year. But in that year, if I could help you get closer to your career goal, let me help you. But I can only do that if you have some idea of what you want to do.
And so we've kind of combined, the career planning with the field knowledge, the lack of achievement, we kind of touched on that a little bit too. So, basically what that lack of achievement and the field knowledge, basically what that means is get the experience, while you're in college. The lack of achievement, like if you've done leadership stuff in your fraternity or sorority or whatever group, highlight that on your resume. That's your opportunity to help sell yourself, is highlight those, if you volunteer to, do something with a charity, you organize something, put that on there, put that on your resume. That shows some kind of achievement other than I went to school for 4 years, 5 years, got my degree, but you didn't do anything else. And I'm not saying not getting, not finishing your degree isn't a great thing, but you're looking for a job, right? So they want to see, like, even if that job doesn't apply to like what you did in college, like if you had a job, the Chuck E. Cheese thing, but at least that shows like you put forth an effort to do something else along with going to school as well. And who knows, like part of what you learned at Chuck E. Cheese might benefit the role that you're, applying for. Poor communicator, whether it's the interview or career expo, come prepared. You're hearing that word again, right? Preparation, being prepared. Make sure you're communicating. Come with questions, or come with knowledge. Like I said, if you walk up to the table and I'm at your career expo and you're like, oh man, I read you guys just, you're in this state now, or you just did this or did that. That lets me know like you came to the table ready to communicate versus just like, oh, okay, what's a distributor? Because I get that all the time. Like, okay, I'll talk to you about it because you might not really know what we do. I'm okay with that question. But also come with something that shows me like you are ready to have a conversation with me other than me talking for 10 or 15 minutes, because I'm going to have other students as well, so I have to share my time with them. So if you come prepared, that just helps the dialogue go a lot better as well. And it shows me that you're really interested in my company. You're not just trying to check a box for one of your classes.
No, 100%. And like back to poor communication, like I was very shy. Like I would not be doing this 3-4 years ago if you asked me to. This is just not what I do. But like even just eye contact, even the eye contact in interviews goes a long way. Like I will have front desk agents that I will train now. Like when you're checking someone in, it's nerve-wracking. You may have someone like that looks like Willie that's like, hey, he looks very professional. He could be my future boss. Like, oh my God, like what's going on? To just a normal parent. But just that eye communication makes you look very interested. And again, it's okay to be shy. I'm shy. But like that already gives you like an extra oomph of confidence. Like we can make eye-to-eye conversation. You can make that connection. I know you're listening. But if you're like nervous, looking down, fidgeting, again, it's okay to be nervous, but like show that you're listening. Because if you're looking down, fidgeting, looking like, behind, looking at the posters, wherever you're interviewing, like I wouldn't feel it. I would be like, okay, you're not here for me. We're both wasting each other's time. Be honest story. I once had someone I was training, and I was supposed to train him from 3 to 11. At 9 o'clock, I saw no interest in him, and I told him, hey, you could go home. And he's like, oh, really? He went home. I could tell you he never came back. But he wasted 6 hours of my day right there. I paid him 6 hours of his day when we both weren't interested. You're allowed to be honest and have that conversation, but make that eye-to-eye communication. It goes a long way.
Yeah, it's important to, have that, communication with the person you're talking to, because it lets them show that you're listening and that you also have questions, right? The receive, appreciate, summarize, and ask. It's a thing called RASA is what it's called. So like receiving is, like acknowledging. It could be like if I'm talking to you, like acknowledge that you're paying attention, you're engaged. Like it could be a nod, like, yeah, okay, or just a subtle like, okay, but it just shows that you're paying attention to what I'm saying. That's a form of communication, that nod. Like if I'm talking to you about we're in 38 states and, plus DC, and we have these opportunities, you might not want to stop me, but if you just nod or like, oh yeah, I saw that, and just let me keep moving on, and lets me know that you're engaged in the conversation and that you're communicating and that you're paying attention. This one, even though we didn't do these in any particular order, but the not prepared for an interview. this is your time to sell yourself, right? So be prepared. Like, go to that interview with questions, and everybody has a different number of questions that they might, for me, I always have like 4 or 5. You might not get through all 5, but at least like when that person's done interviewing you and they ask you like, hey, do you have any questions? You don't want to be that person at any point in your career, whether you're a student or if you've been out in the work world for a long time. You never want to be that person like, no, you pretty much answered everything. Even if they've said something, just come up with something to expand on. Even if you already know the answer, just throw something out there. Be prepared though. Come with those questions, 4, 5, 6, whatever it looks like for you. Just make sure you're prepared. Come in looking professionally. Don't come in like, we've all seen the pictures and everything, the memes, you got the person walking in like this, carrying everything, their hair is a mess, the tie's all this way. Like, don't be that person. Be prepared. Come in looking professionally. Have your copies of your resume. Even if they already have your resume, I would still bring a physical copy of the resume or any other, information that you would like them to know about you. So just make sure you're prepared when you walk through the front door, get the good night's sleep, and, don't be in a rush, show up on time, those type of things.
Yeah, when being prepared for an interview, I definitely say show up early, because you just don't know. At least you have some headspace to yourself to calm down any nerves you're thinking of. If you have any last questions, or like big thing like doing your homework, like, hey, you might have worked the night before, studied for an exam, and now you have this interview the next day. Once the expo, have the interview the next day, like, show up early. Give yourself 10, 15 minutes to use your phone, look at what you need to do. I never had the best memory. Do it right there. It's just fresh. It's out of your head. You're like, oh, I know, like, there's 187 hotel indigos. What makes you different from the next one? Like, those little things. Like, relax yourself. I always say, like, 15 minutes early gives you enough time. It's great. It gives me the idea that you're going to be on time for work, so that's already a check mark on my end. Like, oh, 15 minutes, a little too early to come to work, but I know you'll be on time if I were to hire you. So little things like that, like how he said and mentioned earlier, like, yes, your interview time might be at 2 o'clock, but sometimes the interview process has already started for you guys. From that first moment you met, the first handshake, that first communication of interest, like, it's like you're on a go time until that hiring yes or no.
Yeah. And one thing, about being prepared, and you guys are in a great environment, with Dedman, to where there's not a professor that would not, like, if the company says, hey, you have an interview at the time you have a class, I'm sure there's not one of your professors that would tell you still have to be in class that time. Like, if you tell them, like, hey, I have an interview with someone with so-and-so, they're going to give you that opportunity. So that's part of being prepared as well, is like, not, make sure that you're addressing anything that needs to be addressed prior to that interview. So that way you're not thinking about, oh, I'm missing class and all that. Like, have that conversation with your professor, so you're not walking in that interview nervous because you just skipped class that day. Get that off your plate. Have that conversation with your professor. Like, see what you can do to, if it's an assignment or whatever you might be, lecture you might be missing out on or whatever, see what you can do in order to, make that up or, get the information you need. Interest is not genuine. This is one I mentioned earlier about the checking a box thing. If you are just checking a box, make it look like to me you're not checking a box. BS me. So I don't know you're checking a box. Like, oh, my professor says I have to talk to 10 people at the Career Expo. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that. Come prepared like you would for the company that you want to hire you. Prepare for me the same way, even if I'm not the one that's for you. But if you come to talk to me, be prepared to talk to me. Be genuine about it. Don't just come to me to check a box. Ask some questions, because you might gain some knowledge about my company to make you think like, well, I was checking a box, but now he's like told me something that lets me know, like, yeah, I'm not into sales, but he mentioned they have finance, IT, marketing. They have other opportunities within their company. So just make sure that, your interest is genuine and not genuine versus that. So.
Yeah, because it's two people's time. It's not just your time, but it's also our time as well.
Like the Career Expo, in a couple of weeks or so, there's going to be 4 of us from my company that will be here. That's all of our times, you know? So it's very important that, you know, you're not wasting your time and then, you know, all of our time, you know, as well.
Or like if you have to reschedule an interview, I always say, please do it at least 24 hours in advance. And things that might pop up the last time, like very last minute, I totally understand that. But if you forgot about something, double booked, like, you know, let us know with ample amount of time, because sometimes I've had people who just miss interviews, which happens, but then I'm sitting there like, why? What happened? I could have scheduled someone else during this time and things like that. Like, all of us have so much going on.
No enthusiasm. So I work for a fun company. So whether it's Career Expo, information session, or interview, come with enthusiasm, come with passion. Let me see you're truly interested in that position, you know, that you've applied for with my company. Or, you know, even at the Career Expo, you know, come with some enthusiasm to show me that you're really interested in what we have to offer. Or if you're gaining information as I'm talking to you, you know, show that enthusiasm. You know, like, oh, I never knew a distributor like existed or what a distributor does. Like, I just thought you guys, like, I've had students tell me before, and it shows me like they were passionate, but they're like, I really thought what you guys did was boring. That's why whenever my professors mentioned distributor, they would be like, yeah, you know, like, that's not really hospitality, you know, that's what they would think. But they showed the passion and they laughed when they would tell me, and they're like, oh, now that I know, like, I'm interested. So just make sure you're enthusiastic and you're not sitting in front of that hiring person, like, just drab and just letting them do all the talking. You know, make sure you're showing that you're, you know, interested in the position and that there's some enthusiasm there as well.
No, completely, because again, at least here when we do interviews with you guys, we kind of block out like 30-minute sessions and stuff like that. You could either like sit there and not be interested, enthusiastic, and those will be the longest 30 minutes, depending on if we can read it, because sometimes we'll even be like, okay, we're done. Like, obviously we won't cut it off, we'll like make it feel like you can either have the longest 30 minutes or the quickest 30 minutes, or and he could say for himself, I've had interviews that lasted more than 30 minutes. I'm like, oh my God, sorry, we need to stop. Like, this is going so well. But like, be passionate in that. Like, I will relieve my card here. I always ask my first question is, who is Brandon? Tell me about Brandon. Like, I want to start you off awake. Tell me about yourself. Not that I could read on your resume, because I could see that you worked here, you're in this organization and stuff, but what makes you passionate? And like, I'll try to spin around the job and like, okay, this is what we can do. This is what's interesting here for you. And that way you can make connection that's worth your while and worth your time.
Yeah, I like to get to know, you know, people in a job interview as well. And that's kind of my thing, you know, even within my company. And it might be somebody I've worked with for a long time, but I don't work side by side with them. And they're interviewing, when I was a hiring manager, they're interviewing for a position I had available. I sit down in front of them, I'm like, hey, tell me something about yourself, you know, like, because I push everything before we get into the meat of everything. You know, we have an interview guide, you know, that we go by. I slide everything off and I'm just like, I push their resume to the side. It's like, tell me something about yourself. Even though I've known you 10 years, 5 years, 15 years, tell me something I might not know. And that gets people to talking. No matter what stage you are in your life, if I ask any of you right now to tell me something interesting about yourself, whether it's a hobby, your family, school, whatever, you're able to do it. You know, so one of our hiring managers did something a little bit unique handful of weeks ago. Instead of doing the typical, like he had to go through the traditional job interview stuff, but he told the applicants, he's like, look, he goes, pick something you're passionate about and do like a 4-page presentation, 3 or 4-page presentation to present to them in the interview. So one of the applicants, he was passionate about a particular football team. It wasn't Florida State, but you know, I forgive him for that. But he picked one of his sports teams and he did a 3 or 4-page presentation on that. And that just started them talking, and the hiring manager got to know him better. You know, and then they got into the meat of the interview, because you do have legitimate questions you have to ask and things like that, you know, but, you know, it's just things like that, you know, that you have to think about, you know, as well. Bad-mouthing the previous boss. Don't ever do this, and I've had someone do this. Like I told you before we started this, we could probably both, and Alicia could probably throw some stuff in here as well, because we talked about all these earlier this morning. This is the one slide that there's so much information on this one slide up here, but that one there, I don't care what your experience was, what your reason is for leaving a company. Don't ever come into an interview bad-mouthing your previous boss or previous company. Don't, like in my industry, like in certain areas, we know the bad ones and the good ones, but don't even include that in there. You could have had the worst experience of your life. They could have fired you for no reason whatsoever. Don't bring that into the interview. Do not. Just leave it.
And you don't know who knows who.
Yeah.
Talking in Tallahassee, I've been at 2 different hotels now in Tallahassee, and someone I interviewed did their research on me, and they're like, oh man, I saw you on LinkedIn, you worked at XYZ, and I was like, yeah, I totally did. And they were like, oh my God, wasn't this person blah, 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 and I was like, I talk to that person every day, and it was the most awkward interview I probably to this day have ever sat in through, because all they did was talk about the person and talked about how, oh, at this job, I'll make sure to do more, because over there, I just sit there on my phone until I check in someone. And I was like, I'm great for the honesty. I'm glad you are going to put a step forward in what you do, but I don't want to know that, because now my thought process when I walk out of my building and leave you at the front desk, is he going to be on his phone? Am I have to check the cameras? So you don't know who knows each other. Everyone in Tallahassee, at least hotel-wise, we go to meetings all the time. We have general meetings once a month with other GMs and other directors of sales and AGMs. So we're in a close-knit community. I know someone, at least one person at every hotel. And that's how, again, even in our jobs, we want to continue making connections in different places for us. And if I ever needed to borrow keys and stuff like that, I know to go borrow that hotel, but be careful about who you mention. If you're leaving a company because you want more for yourself, focus on that. I want to these are the goals I'm looking for, and I feel in this role, in this job, in this position, I could do that with you. Don't be hey, I applied, they didn't give me the front desk supervisor position, so that's why I'm applying over here. And we still do reference checks. I still do reference checks. I know that's a lot of things. You're oh, do they really call? Some people don't, some people do, but if you're telling one thing, someone might say the other way around. So just be prepared.
You hit on a good point with references, even though that's not something that we've talked about yet. If you do list references, on your resume or an application, make sure they're legitimate, and they're going to be that true reference for you, so just make sure that information's up to date, so as you're updating your resumes and things like that, update your references too, because if you put somebody on there that you were friends with, or they were your boss or something at a previous place and they're no longer there, and they call and well, I don't know why he put me on here because they fired me, so
yeah.
Make sure your references are up to date.
And I'm pretty sure it might still have it in your guides, but follow up and ask someone to be put on their reference. Yeah. I get that text message from my old colleagues all the time, and I love it. Oh yeah, let's go ahead and do it. But make sure they're aware of it, and especially if you're just going through the hiring process, hey, you're gonna get a random number calling you from this area code. It might be because I'm applying to this, so just be prepared, because some people will not answer that call or be there for you when you're kind of expecting to. So whenever you're getting ready for that, follow up with them, be hey, are you still willing to be a reference for me? I'm going into interviews, so you might get some calls or an email. Again, he said, make sure they're still working. They might have moved on and still be willing to talk about you and for you, but just make sure everyone's on the same playing field on that.
Yeah. Overbearing or conceited. So the one great thing college gives you, right, is access to knowledge. So you can get certifications, you can, be leadership in groups and things like that. So, but when you put that stuff on your resume and you go in for the interview, don't be conceited. It's okay to be confident, and I know it's always a fine line, but if they're talking to you, asking you questions, don't be that person. Well, yeah, I'm a master at Excel. I don't, that's not a problem for me. Don't be that person. Don't be that conceited. Let them continue to talk to you, and if you are a master in a particular area, that's fine. You don't have to hit them over the head with it. Just be confident that, okay, yes, I have this certification, or I have a 3.9999 GPA. That's cool. It's great. but don't be conceited about your accomplishments. Just be confident when they're talking to you about it, but don't be conceited like you know everything and, you know, there's like, yeah, I'm applying, like I'm an asset to you guys even though they haven't hired you yet. Don't be that person.
Or like for me, I'll sometimes get like someone who applies, they're like, oh yeah, my dad works for the company. Like makes it awkward for us when we have like that, like someone ahead of us. But like, trust me, that person behind, if you have that connection, will always come to us and let us know like, hey, you're interviewing XYZ, this is the relationship, da-da-da. Don't just, I've had that person come to me before and it's like, oh, I already know I got the job, like, you know, he's taking care of me up there. Like, no, like still give us a fair chance to have that conversation with you just because you may or may not have a shoe in because you might rub someone the wrong way.
Yeah, we had a hiring manager, this was a couple of years or so ago, they were interviewing somebody and we're all sitting around. This goes back to what you were saying, like people always communicate and talk. So the hiring manager was telling me, and I was still a hiring manager at the time, they interviewed somebody and they were asking them about a particular chain. You know, like, well, how would you go with addressing the business? Because they were interviewing for a sales manager position. They're like, how would you go about, you know, this process at this particular chain? So their response was, my boyfriend works there, so I know everything about the chain I need to know. Exact words that they gave the hiring manager. Do not do that. Do not do that. That gives you like no credibility. Like, yeah, you might have insight to some inside information, like once you get the job, that might help you do your job better. But when you're interviewing, that's just being conceited. That's telling the hiring manager, like, there's nothing you can tell me that I don't already know. And that's wrong. It's gonna be a knockout factor. Yeah. Don't worry about the money. I know everybody is, no matter what phase of life you're in. We always want to make more money. But you know, when you're graduating, do not worry about the money all the time. It will come. It's going to take time. You're not going to get it your first year, that first job, you know. So don't let that consume you when you're interviewing. Yes, you want to pay attention to what they're offering. I'm not saying don't pay attention to the money aspect at all. I'm just saying don't let it consume you. Because you have to start somewhere. You're not starting up here. None of us are. You know, you have to start somewhere. And the sooner you start, then you can get up here. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, completely. Look at money and like cost of living side to side with one another. But just remember, like, oh, I graduated, again, Dedman's the best school. I graduated from Dedman Hospitality, and, you know, I'm going to be that manager when I get out. Like, yes, money comes a position, but, like, again, guys, I graduated in 2018. I'm an AGM. It's because I worked hard. I didn't go chasing the money, because if I chase the money, you will find out real quick how unhappy you're going to be. You get paid so much money and still be allowed to be unhappy.
How do you answer the question of what salary, what wage are you looking for this position? Because I get that question a lot in interviews and I have never known how to answer that.
So for me, it's just me seeing if you did research more than anything, like, oh, what range are you willing to be in? Because most places, especially nowadays in hospitality for us, we're trying to grab people. And it's more of like, what do you feel comfortable in? And I feel like I only ever ask that question if you've already been in that position that I'm hiring you for. So I know it's me reflecting more of like what they were paying you in more of a range. I wouldn't go, if you had no front desk experience, go to you like, oh, what do you want to get paid? I will be honest, and like hopefully you would ask me that question, like, oh, what is your range? And we could have that conversation. To me, though, if someone's asking you that, it's because they see something on, like, you've already kind of had something similar to them. We just want to know that we're not lowballing you, or like if you have an expectation, if we can meet that. Because in some positions, we do have a range of what we can offer you.
And this is when you can, you know, earlier this morning we talked about networking, right? So this is an opportunity when you're trying to figure things out, like reach out to your Knoll network, right? And like if they're in the one cool thing about LinkedIn, right? You go on there, it can tell you like if you go on there and look at my company right now, or it'll tell you like, oh, there's X amount of people that graduated from Florida State. Do that, reach out, send them a message. Like, hey, you know, I'm graduating, I'm applying for this position. What's a realistic expectation of where, you know, I might start? So that way when you do, you know, sit down in front of that hiring manager, like you have you're not gonna be down to the penny or down to the last couple of thousand, but at least you're in that range and you're not asking for this and we're paying this, because if you ask for this and we're paying this, it's probably going to be a knockout factor. Like, well, we're $20,000 apart. They're right out of college and they're asking for this without any experience other than like an internship. Like, that's not going to be realistic.
I saw a hand over there.
This one you kind of have to fill out you got to feel the vibe of the person that's interviewing you. It is okay to ask in either phase of the interview because it is something that's important, right? I mean, yes, you want the experience, you want the job, but you do have cost of living to worry about because you're on your own now. Like if your parents are paying for you to go to college, like that's done. Like you're paying for rent now, you're paying for the car insurance and all this other stuff, health insurance, things like that. So we understand, like if you were to ask me that in an interview, like I wouldn't be bothered by it. I would answer your question. I would give you some kind of range or something like that. It wouldn't be a knockout factor for me because I think it's a realistic question regardless if it's the first interview or the second interview because you can ask it in the first interview because it might be the difference of if I'm interested in hiring you and you ask me like, what's the range? And I tell you, oh, it's X amount of thousand. And you're like, well, it might not work for you. You might not tell me that. But if I call you back for the second interview and you're like, well, I'm not looking at moving forward because of, the income. And that's fair to ask. I wouldn't ask it like the first couple of questions or anything. I would make it like my fifth, fourth question or something like that.
Yeah, I agree too. And to me, interview process, I wouldn't let it get to the point of like the last steps because then, like he just said, like we may have wasted your time and you not being honest with like your expectations, like now both of our times are wasted. So for me, it'd be like when I normally like to lead the interview myself, have that discussion, and normally like tend like, oh, do you have any questions? Like bring it up. And that way, like you have that follow up, like, oh man, thank you for your time. It was wonderful to talk about this. I learned a little bit about this. But after like reviewing, like what you guys are offering might not meet my needs.
Yeah,
that's very appropriate.
I've had an applicant let it get to the stage before the job offer. Don't ever let it get that far. It was like she said, don't ever let it, like you already know, like we've discussed money. You already know the range of what I'm offering you, and then when you tell me you're declining the job because the money's not right, well, you've wasted all of our time. You've wasted my HR's time, my time. You wasted your own time if you let it get that far and you say no because the money doesn't work.
And you definitely want to know. Some places it's very 50-50, whether some places will tell you up front that it's posted or some might not tell you at all. And it's not for bad reason. They're just trying to get people in, so definitely guys ask.
The no questions thing, we kind of mentioned that, throughout the whole morning as far as being prepared. You have to have some kind of questions to ask. And you have to have some kind of follow-up as well. The follow-up part is like we mentioned earlier with the returning the emails and phone calls and all that kind of stuff. The no questions, you have to have some type of questions. And the one great thing about Google, you can Google like the top 15 questions to ask an interviewer. Now you don't want to ask all 15, but everybody in this room, like even myself, like if I was interviewing for a position, at Indigo, like I can walk out of here without even knowing precisely what I might need to ask today, this afternoon. I can Google on my phone in a heartbeat like 5 questions to ask about the hotel industry. Like, just legitimate, hardcore questions to ask. So there should be no excuse in this day and age that you don't have a question or 2 or 3 to ask.
And like I feel like sometimes I've had like someone like, oh my God, you've answered all my questions, but twist it a little bit. Be like, oh, you've actually answered ironically all my questions. Like I'll normally go over like what a day-to-day looks like on a shift, things like that. And they're like, oh, that's exactly the question I had. Now what? They'd be like, oh, you said this about this. Now, off that answer I gave you, try to come up with an answer. Like, oh, man, you mentioned, like, oh, I'm checking people in. What are, for hotels, you'll like, learn this. And if you haven't already taken Lydia's class, like, we have standards. Like, what are your standard check-ins? Like you could still develop questions out of questions you may have that we may accidentally have answered for you before you even had the opportunity to ask.
And if, when it comes to like the interviewer asking you questions, if you don't understand something, like we talked earlier about situational interviewing, like they're going to ask you like, what's a difficult situation you've overcome, things like that. if you don't completely understand what they're looking for or asking you, ask them to give you an example. You know, that's fair. So that way you can answer that question properly. Like, hey, can you give me an example of what you mean by, because your work experience isn't the same as mine, or life experiences either. So it's okay to ask them for clarification or an example before you try to answer that question. Unrealistic expectations. So we've kind of hit on this one too, but when we were talking about money a little bit, just be realistic. You're getting out into the real world for the first time, and I know some of you have had jobs, throughout college or whatever, but this is you really being out there on your own in a real world 40, 50, 60 hours a week. So be realistic about what you want out of that opportunity and what you want out of life. I had one of my, former sales reps that, his parents had a really nice house in a really nice part of Orlando, and they have a really nice beach house, on one of the beaches in Florida. And he was so frustrated, and he's a FSU grad. So, he and I always had this bond, but at the time he was 26, 27, and he wanted what his parents had. Well, his dad was, executive somewhere at a Fortune 500 company for 30 years, and his mom did this. I'm like, hey, it's going to take you time. You're 26, you're 25, you're 27. You're not going to have the $400,000 or $500,000 beach house and the $400,000 or $500,000 house in the nice area of Orlando, 3 years after graduating or 4 years after graduating college. You have to build that equity. So you have to be realistic about your expectations, because if you don't have realistic expectations, you're going to start job hopping, looking for that extra $3,000 or $4,000 or $6,000, and you're just going to mess up your opportunities later in life. Because, we talked about how, we don't want to see all those different jobs in a short period of time. If you're 5 years removed from college and you've worked at 8 places already, it's not a good look. So be realistic about your expectations of what you want and be patient.
If you're trying to move up in the hospitality world, how often should you be looking for changing jobs, new opportunities? Every 2 years, every 3 years, every year? What is an acceptable or optimal range?
So ironically, we were talking about this earlier. So I think it just depends on your career planning and what your expectations are. So I go back, talk to your managers, ask them what are the skill sets I need to learn and stuff like that. Because if any one of you guys looked at my LinkedIn or my resume, I moved up quickly. I tell people all the time, it's not, yes, it's a personality thing, but it's what you're willing to give, especially in hotels. So I always, when you guys are learning about the industry and what hotel, especially you guys want to work for, that has a lot to do with it. So Lowe's, when I always said, when I graduated, I'm going back to Lowe's. Those rooms are 500 plus rooms. Those people have long-term goals. They're in their positions longer, so turnover there is not as quick. Gaining a manager position in that hotel might not be quick, but I'm not telling you not to work there, but talk to those managers how they can train you to get those skill sets so then you could apply it for another hotel. So I've been, I said, in Tallahassee 6 years. I was at my first hotel for 3 years. I did my internship, my hotel for 3 years, and I've been here for 2 years. But all my positions are moved quickly. Wow. Why? Because I was in a limited service hotel. Limited service, we have quicker turnaround. Positions open quicker, depending, again, that also depends on your city you're in. So it's just don't sell yourself short and be willing to put in the work. So for my thing, for unrealistic expectations, us being in hospitality, be real and honest with what you want your day-to-day life to look like. So if you're going into hotels and front office, be mindful that you're working weekends, you are working holidays, and most places as a front desk agent starting off there, you're working nights. So you need to be honest with that's the lifestyle you want, or if you're no, I kind of like my weekends, I like my 9 to 5, then you might need to look at a career path and how it gets you there. But some, right now, a lot of things like that, it's very quick, 2 years, 3 years, but it all depends on your skill set. So don't be unrealistic either and graduate and be oh, I have a degree, I could be a manager. It's not how it works in hotels. People will make it a lot further by putting in the work, the hours, the time, the willingness to learn and do odd jobs. Like, I started doing beds and making beds, and that's how I became an executive housekeeper. Like, it wasn't because like, oh, Lena, you graduated, you've been a front office supervisor for 2 years, great. No, it's being able to do those odd, weird things. And especially during COVID, definitely taught you like you're doing a little bit of everything. So with hotels, as much as I could speak about it, it is ever changing, but it's depending on like your opportunities, what your skill set, and what work you put into it.
Yeah, you have to, that's also an opportunity to, make sure that that culture matches what you're looking for. Like with my company, if you're in sales, you're busy during the holidays, regardless of what division you're in. If you're in sales, if you're on premise, which is restaurants, hotels, if you're off premise, which, is the liquor stores, grocery stores, things like that, you're busy during the holidays. So if you're that person that wants that week off to spend with your family during the holidays, you don't want to do sales with us. Like, you'll have a quality of life during the holidays, but you're not going to have a week off. You're not going to have Christmas week off. You're not going to have Thanksgiving week off. I mean, you're going to have your holidays we give you off, and you'll have a quality of life, but you're not going to have that week. The same thing with hotels, restaurants. Like, if you're looking for that, I want to, spend a week with my family at home during Christmas or whatever, like, you got to be aware of, like, the situation you're putting yourself in. Make sure you're matching your culture with that, that company's culture.
And going back to like doing that research, like market research, like I could tell you, football seasons, we're working. But during Christmas time, it is slow in Tallahassee. Like, besides coming to visit, if you have family here, like everyone's leaving the city. Yeah. But then January, February, it's busy, it's session. March, we're slow, April, but then graduation week, we're busy. So like, when you're doing your research, know what's going on around that area of that business and what that season may look like for you. If you're in Orlando, you're busy 365 days of the year at Universal and Disney. So like, think of that. It's not that you're not going to get vacation time, because hotel people get the best discounts, but just be aware of like what that looks like, what your interest is and stuff.
So when we were talking about earlier, gain industry perspective, that's part of, knowing the industry, whether it's my industry, the hotel industry, restaurant industry, that's all part of it, of gaining that, perspective on what you're diving into. Evasive or makes excuses. So do not make excuses for anything that's on your resume. Like, you can do whatever you need to do with your resume to avoid this, but don't make excuses for things. Like, if you have a lapse there somewhere, within, whether it's internships or actual work experience, explain it. You're a student. Like, we're interviewing you, so we'll probably understand it. But explain it. Like, if you worked abroad or something like that, or went to school abroad, I should say, be ready to explain that gap between not working, however many semesters that was. So just don't make excuses, but be ready to explain it, and don't try to avoid a question. Like, if they ask you something that's on your resume, answer it. Be honest, because if you are sitting there hemming and hawing and trying to think of an answer, we're like, they're about to lie to us. They're not about to tell us the truth at all, because you're trying to think of that answer. So just be honest with, what you have, on your resume, and be honest with the questions that we're asking. Lack of maturity and poise, like I said earlier, we're adulting, right? So it's your time. You're growing up. You're no longer the freshman or sophomore, junior, or whatever. You're a senior now, and you're applying for positions, so you have to have maturity. The one thing that's a lot different with the experiences you get these days versus when I went to college is they're preparing you for some of this. Like, you might not get 100% life skills, but you're getting some life skills from Dedman. Like you're learning how to interview, and by your junior year or senior year, you probably have learned how to live on your own without your parents doing your laundry and grocery shopping for you, things like that. This is the time when you sit in that interview to act like an adult. Be poised, be ready. Don't act like you're 17, 18, 19 anymore. You're an adult. You're getting ready to go out in the real world. So a lot of what's being done today is, you're gaining a skill today by listening to the two of us. Is helping you prepare. We didn't have this when I was in college. Like, hey, we got help with resumes, and we had the career center and things like that. But we didn't have opportunities, like this to help us, develop skills.
Yeah, and it's definitely okay to not have everything going on, like aligned and perfect, like, oh my God, I'm a junior, I should have all these things. It is fine. All of our career and life paths are very different, but like, no one knows that in an interview. Right. What you bring to the interview is what you want to bring. So like, even if you're like, oh my God, I don't think I'm there yet, like, I don't think I'm mature, I don't think I'm ready for this, like, you make it, you're selling yourself. So like, I don't need to know that. Like, and again, also take it into consideration, like you're making a commitment to this job, to this internship, like especially during internship time, you're giving yourself 3 months, like to these people, this company that you're working for. So it's okay to not have it all together in the background, but like, don't let that show in the interview whatsoever. Like, you're here, you're ready, you're confident, you got this, like you're owning this. You're walking out thinking you have the job, and that's what you should go in thinking when you're stepping into it. Like, this is my job. It's my opportunity to lose.
And with all these, like, I will tell you, one of the other things is it's okay to be nervous and afraid. I mean, I knew where I was working when I graduated, and I was still nervous as hell. Like, got done with graduation, family left and went back home and everything, and I was just like, I just remember thinking when I was back in the apartment by myself, I was like, wow, I start work on, like, real work on Monday. Because that's how soon my job started. I didn't have the week or the 2 weeks or the month. And if you get that opportunity, go ahead and work. Don't just dive in. Because if you take time off, you're just going to start thinking more. But I just remember, like, how afraid I was. And I already had knocked out the biggest part. I knew where I was going to work, but I was still scared. I was like, holy crap, I'm calling my mom. I'm like, I'm going to work on Monday. She's like, I know, we talked about that before we left to go back to Texas. So, and I remember my sister, she's a few years older than I am. She's like, it's like, yeah, you got to work on Monday, like real work, like not like, hey, you're working part-time at the bookstore and then you go study and you go to class and then you got the football game on Saturday. Like, no, you're working like all week, like they don't care about the football game on Saturday. Poor appearance or sloppy. This is another one. We're all adults at this point, right? So like all of you have come dressed perfect today. So just keep it going, just make sure your appearance, we'll get more into this when we break out like later this morning, but just make sure you have a professional appearance. You know what you need to look like, like all of you knew, like you're not even interviewing today, but all of you came dressed nice and, appearance is great and everything. So, just keep that moving forward when you're interviewing and when you show up for interviews.
Yeah, I would say, biggest thing is just like, look ready, we all get ready for stuff and life happens, like, oh my God, ketchup just stained my shirt or something. I've had it happen to myself. I'm like, I have 10 minutes, what do I do? Don't focus on it. Don't let it be a focus. Like, come with your jacket. It's always prepared to come with a jacket. Like, even if you're like, oh, it's more laid back of an interview, or definitely like where we're meeting up. I've gotten interviewed at a coffee shop before and I was like, how do I dress? But like, always think a little bit more elevated, because once you get into that job, and we talked about this earlier at breakfast, like they'll have conversations of what you're gonna be wearing time to time. So like my front desk agents wear jeans. Yes, they wear jeans. That's kind of like the new modern type way for front desk. But like, I was not expecting them to come in jeans for the interview. So still come out over, and then once you get hired, we'll have that conversation like, oh, you looked wonderful, but now we're gonna take it back. Well, this is our style. My servers wear plaid shirts. Like, they kind of look like farmers. So things like that, but like, just, elevate yourself, take 2 steps more, because it shows us like you woke up and got ready for us.
And you can always, like, there's so many different options. Like, I know not everybody might, have the money for, a brand new suit or whatever. I had someone share a very personal story with me actually, last week about their process when they got in the working world, and they had an interview. And they knew their long-term goal was to be a manager with our company, but the spot they were interviewing for wasn't a management spot, entry-level position at the time. And they shared a personal story with me about like what they had to do to look their best. Like, they went and bought a suit from a thrift store. like for $50, like a full suit, and got the shirt and tie and all that because they knew like they wanted to present their best self for that interview. So like there's options, like there's no excuse to show up, with the jeans and the t-shirt or the jeans and the polo shirt for an interview. Now, if they tell you on the second interview, dress casual like that, you can do it. But the first interview, you need to be on point. And, like I wouldn't, you can buy shirts, especially guys, like dress shirts for almost nothing these days, so, just make sure you're, doing your best to, make sure your appearance is its best. So all of us agree this morning, that whole like ringing cell phone thing, and in this day and age, like I don't have my Apple Watch on today, but
Guilty.
I'm sure few people in here do. Make sure that thing's off. You're like I didn't turn my phone off, but I put it on silent. There's no reason for me to have it clipped on my side or in my pocket while I'm up here talking to you. It would only be a distraction. I mean, how would you feel if all of a sudden like my phone started buzzing and I go like this, like, hey, listen, yeah, I'll get back to them. And then I turn back around and start talking to you. I'm not giving you my full attention. So if you do the same thing in an interview, you're not giving that interviewer your full attention. I've had someone do this, pull the phone out of their pocket as I'm interviewing them, ask them a question because it started vibrating. They pull it out of their pocket. They actually looked at it, and I could tell they were hesitating on whether or not they should answer it. And I was like, is it an emergency? Because I could tell like they were still thinking about whether or not they should answer it. And then they, and I was like, well, what's going on? And it's an emergency. Oh, it's my brother. I'm like, put the phone away. Let's continue to talk. But they should not have even had the phone on silent. Leave it in your car. Or if you have a bag with you, put it in your bag. But make sure it's on silent. The smartwatches, turn them off. Leave it in your bag. Leave it in your car. If you think it'll be a distraction, because if you're answering a question that I ask you in an interview and your wrist starts to buzz, you're going to be distracted. You might not look at it, but it might throw you off your game. Like if you're answering that question perfect that I ask you, and then all of a sudden your wrist starts to vibrate and you're like, you lose your train of thought. And then all of a sudden, like, you're trying to figure out like, okay, where did I leave off in answering his question? So just make sure all that stuff's off or silent or not with you.
Yeah, so same thing I was gonna say, like ladies, if you do carry your purse around, I didn't today, but like try to move it to the side, or like I tell gentlemen, like, oh, normally like my interviews are set up with multiple chairs, like put it on the chair right next to you, so even if you do have it on vibrate, you don't feel it, you don't get caught off guard, because like you may tell everyone that morning, like, hey, I have an interview, you're still gonna get a call. And it might not even be, it could be a spam call, like you already feel some sort of uneasiness, like make it a little bit more easier for yourself. A lot of smartphones these days have like the option of do not disturb, like it'll send that person that message. If it's an emergency, and it will come through if they call like 3-4 times. But like that's one thing to like alleviate stress on you, especially. Like I know I just finished saying at the beginning, like, oh, do your research before. So your phone's gonna be with you, just put it where you don't feel it when it does vibrate and stuff like that. And again, like I said, very guilty. I love the weight of my watch. Like me and Alicia were talking about the weight of this watch. But it does have the feature to put on do not disturb sleep mode, and then I'll unlock it when I'm ready for it.
Yeah, because one thing we talked about this morning also is like, if you have your smartwatch set up to monitor your health. So you're in an interview, what happens to your heart rate or your blood pressure or whatever? It's gonna go up. So what are you gonna get an alert? Breathe. So just cut it off. So that way you don't get that alert. So that was like the one we kind of agreed, this morning was like kind of a pet peeve of all of us. So, as technology grows, we're just going to have more of that could possibly interfere with the interviewing process. So just make sure you have it silenced or do not disturb.
That is a good point for our 10-minute break.
Okay.
The restroom, water, 10 minutes. It is 10:45, so 10:55 we'll get started back.
That was such a good timing.
everybody enjoy their break? Yeah, cool. Caught up on your calls and your text messages? Your missed assignments you didn't turn in on time? Always maintain professionalism. So this is another one, we just spent some time before the break talking about, your appearance and, you're always on interview, right? So when you're, like it says, out of the office, when you're in that building interviewing or you're in that city, like I was telling you earlier this morning, about me being in Tallahassee, staying at the hotel or whatever, I'm the face of my company when I'm on campus here, I have to be on my best behavior. Not that I'm some kind of wild, crazy man or anything, but, like I have to realize that I need to be professional, so just always, keep that, in mind that you're always, on point with being professional and that you're always looking your best, because you are a walking resume for yourself when we're talking about maintaining your professionalism.
Another thing, like in hotels, I said earlier, like you get hotel discounts 100%. It's the best perk that you could ever have. However, they're still considering you as an employee. You're checking in under an employee rate, so rules still apply to you. So like they will definitely call me up and be like, hey, so-and-so like threw a party and they trashed the room, like they're not allowed back on my property, and like you can lose your discounts over that. So like even though it was your vacation, your personal time, like they were still looking at you and expecting expectations of you as a representative of the hotel, of the same company and franchise and things like that. And again, you are constantly like meeting people. Like you will go to Matt, especially Matt, so I could tell you from experience, I have a lot of people like Willie who are coming through for work, and the first place I'm sending them if they're not sitting at my bar is Matt. So like you could meet a connection that can help you out, someone. So like, just remember people are looking and watching you at all times. It sucks, yes it does, but like, it's great opportunities come from it for you guys.
So this also applies, with visiting companies. Some companies, as you're interviewing, as you're going through the process, your senior year and when you graduate, some companies, whether they pay for you to travel to interview with them or you're driving there yourself or flying there yourself to interview them, like the minute you step in that city, because you never know who you're sitting next to. You could be at Starbucks picking up a coffee and you're 5 miles away from the place where you're going to, interview, and it might be somebody in there that has a relative that works at the company. So be on your best behavior, once you enter, that area when you're visiting, companies, be professional, be aware of like your language, your tone that you're using when you're on the phone. We talked earlier about when you're sitting in the lobby waiting for your turn for the interview. Stay off your phone. Like, yeah, you could text, but I wouldn't take any calls. And if you do have to take a call, like let the person up front know, like, hey, I got to step outside. This is an emergency. Don't conduct your personal business in earshot of somebody, because you never know what you might say that they might tell the hiring person, like, are you really considering hiring that person? I just heard them talking about this or that on the telephone. So just, keep that in mind when you're visiting companies. I just always say just be on your best behavior once you're in that city and in that building.
And I would say like the opposite end as well. Like when you guys are in these cities and going to these places, like ask the person who's working there questions, like, and don't interview them now. But like, oh, how do you like working here? Like it's a super innocent question that does not mean anything, but like they will honestly tell you like word vomit anything, like, oh my God, well, this is my third shift and like I've been like back to back and like I have had no break. Like use that to your advantage too. Like make your rounds, like show up to an interview. Like I said early, like they don't know you're there for an interview until you make it aware, like, oh, I'm here for an interview. So go up 30 minutes early, check out that hotel you're looking at or the restaurant, stuff like that. See things that like that matter to you, like, oh, are they doing their routine cleans? Like, is all the guests, like all the employees are like acknowledging things like that? Like, you could do your own research when you're not on like an interview and stuff like that. And especially like he said, if companies are flying you out, like they kind of have an itinerary for you that's like before the interview, like, oh, like a happy hour, like meet and greet, like you're always on it. Like they will have an itinerary for you, like getting ready to do stuff. So like do your own kind of like secret interview, ask some questions that'll help you like know if you really want this or not.
Conferences, trade shows, like my thing with any of this stuff, is, all this stuff is about being, professional, because, when you are interviewing or you work for a company, you never know who's at these conferences or trade shows. So you need to watch your behavior, watch your, we talked earlier about enthusiasm, right? Be positive when you're at these events and things like that, because you're meeting different people. You never know who might know who from another company. You never know who down the road you might be interviewing with, so just, and make sure you're making connections when you're at conferences and, these trade shows, like network. These are great opportunities to network, get to know people, even if it's a, industry you might not be 100% interested in, it's a good way to network and find out information about other industries, because you never know, like, things that might tie in to each other. Like in my industry right now, Monster Energy just announced they bought 2 breweries, so, you got a lot of crossover these days. Coca-Cola is playing around in that arena now with a seltzer, and, one of the liquor companies is playing around with, making a soft drink. So you just never know, like, what industries will tie into each other. So, use these opportunities to network and, also go there prepared as well, to ask questions and to gain information.
Yeah, and don't restrict yourself. I always said that when you're looking into brands and stuff like that, like brands are constantly acquiring each other. So like when I joined Marriott, they were taking over Starwood. IHG, this is a very boutique resort luxury, but like Mr. and Mrs. Smith hotels, that's definitely a hotel brand. They just got acquired from IHG. So like, just know, like, don't ever be like, oh, I'll never work for that brand, because you don't know if you're gonna end up being forced to work for that brand. So it's like what he said, like everyone's always trying to build their own portfolio and take companies to the next level. So they're always gonna be mixing their hand. And again, that gives you an opportunity, an easy way. And like, oh, I've always wanted to get into, like, if you work for a brewery, oh, I've always wanted to get into seltzers. Like, now they're doing that. Like, how can I get in that way? Or, like, we have some, like, if you guys know, I can't think of the company, but, like, different people are trying to get into, like, hotels and stuff like that. Like, Elvis Presley has a hotel. If you didn't know that, he totally does. And, like, so your, like, business ventures are constantly growing.
Yeah, so that's, another thing with this, too, is, you're using these, the conferences and trade shows as, opportunities. Like, you're selling your brand, right? Like in my company, my industry, I should say, not just at my company, they always tell you, like, never badmouth a brand, because you never know if you're going to end up selling it. So when our salespeople are out on the streets doing their thing, we always tell them, like, if you're selling against a competitor, never badmouth the brand, because you never know when you might end up selling that brand. So when you're at these conferences and trade shows, if you don't like Holiday Inn, don't tell somebody that you don't like Holiday Inn, because you just never know how the industries tie in, or who's going to buy who's going to merge with who. So just, always make sure that you're not, bad-mouthing, a brand or even another industry, because everybody's playing around in each other's, and we do business together. Like, I was sitting, at the hotel, at the bar yesterday, and I was having last night when I got in, and I was having a conversation with the bartender, because I was looking behind the bar to see what brands my company has at the hotel, and I was having a conversation with the bartender about it, and she said something about Fireball. I was like, you guys are good with me. You have Fireball back there, so, and a few other things, but you just, like, we all, dabble in each other's industries. We're partners and things like that. So use it as a true networking opportunity, and just make sure you're not bad-mouthing another industry or brand. Career and internship expos, like, you're gonna be doing a lot of these throughout your, or you should be doing a lot of these. Like, I would use freshman, sophomore year to do, like, the information sessions and gain as much information about the companies you're interested in and the industries you're interested in. And then by the time you get to your senior year, you should be hitting these career and internship expos on a regular basis, and not just using it as a check mark because you have to go for a class or whatever. You want to invest in yourself, and this is a good way for you to invest in yourself to help you with your career opportunities. And just make sure you're prepared. We've talked all day about preparation. You need to be prepared when you go to these career and internship expos. And when I say prepared, be dressed properly. I get it, like you might have worked the night before or whatever. I've seen, normally everything's great, but I've seen people walk through with, t-shirts on and shorts, and I'm just like, are you really taking this seriously, or are you just picking up the freebie stuff on the table? Because some companies have the freebie stuff on the tables and stuff like that, but, take it seriously. Come prepared. Be ready to have those conversations. Have your target list. We talked earlier in the day about, knowing what cities you want to live in and climates and things like that, and you want a list of those cities and things you want. Same thing with the Career Internship Expo. You get this information ahead of time. Target those companies you want to talk to. Educate yourself, gain knowledge about it, and be ready to have those conversations with the recruiters, because that's the first person you're going to speak with for that company, whether it's the recruiter, the training manager like myself, HR person, talent acquisition person. I mean, every company has a different title that they use, but we might not be your hiring manager. So come prepared and ready to have that conversation, but I can be an advocate for you. Like if you come and talk to me or our HR director, like we have your resume that you've left, and I make notes when I talk. When you leave, I'll make a note like, okay, graduating senior, graduates in whatever, December, graduates in April or May, and I make notes and I put a couple of bullet points underneath there as well, like had knowledge, engage in conversation, just little bullet points. So if someone calls and asks, like, hey, so-and-so just applied, they said they talked to you at the career fair, I call HR, I was like, hey, can you email me that resume or send me over that resume, so I can have a conversation with the hiring manager. And it's something I do, and I take pride in doing it, and I make sure it gets done. No matter how busy my day gets, I make sure that if I've talked to you at this, career expo, and you call me and ask me something, I might not get back to you the same day, but I will get back to you. If you apply for something once you graduate, I do the best I can do to help you out, even though I'm not the hiring manager.
And like how Willie said earlier, like taking notes of your networks and people you've met, like definitely use that to your advantage. Like if you are keeping organized with that stuff, because you could definitely come back to me and be like, oh my God, I talked to Oliver and he told me this and this about like you and stuff like that. Like that tells me already like that conversation you had with Oliver was engaging. You remembered something about what he said and what he spoke to you. So like feel free to name drop. Like it doesn't have to be like, oh, like us itself, like, oh man, we talked before, but like other people you've networked and talked to before, because that looks great. Like I know Seminole Gaming comes out here and they bring a lot of people, but like you may not talk to them the next day. They might not be the person interviewing you, but like mention that you spoke to them and you had a conversation about this, because it does look good.
Yeah, it's okay to name drop. My HR department does it. We're going through performance reviews right now, so they were doing a training thing, and they're like, oh yeah, if you have any questions, call Willie. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. So it's okay to name drop, even if the person doesn't know about it. But if you do apply for something, just shoot me an email and let me know that you, or a LinkedIn message or whatever, let me know you applied for something once you graduate, and I will do my best to help you out, at least try to get you through the process, out of the applicant tracking system and actually in front of a hiring manager. I can't guarantee you a job, but I'll do my best to help you out, at least with trying to get you an interview. Who has a resume? Who's graduating within a year? Anyone? Okay, all right, okay. Who feels comfortable about their resume?
That's nice.
Okay, all right, cool. Now I will give Dedman a lot of credit on this. Like, you guys knocked this out of the park. Like, I see some of the resumes at the expos and stuff like that, and I've actually told students before, and I'm not even like looking for a new position in my company right now, but I was like, I'm calling you when I decide to redo my resume, because some of these resumes are just perfect. Like, yeah, I wasn't that good at it when when I was in college. I mean, I learned to get better with it. So one thing on here, I would tell you, like, if you're at a career fair or something like that, I wouldn't put my address on there, especially if you're a young lady. I would not put especially if you're walking around passing out resumes at a career fair. You might feel a little bit safer on your campus, but if you go to one of these other events like we were talking about earlier, and you're like trying to network and you're passing out resumes, I wouldn't put my address on there because you might lose it. They see your name, they see your address. You know, it's just a safety thing with me. If they need your address, you can.
It's on an application. We'll
Yeah.
ask for it for sure.
Internships you want to list first, then work experience. You know, you don't have a lot of work experience, and I know you want to put everything you've done on there. That's when you have an opportunity to sell yourself once you get the interview or when you're at the career expo. You shouldn't have a 2 and 3 page resume. I've had someone give me a 3-page resume before. I don't have a 3-page resume, and I'm a lot older than all of you, and I don't have a 3-page resume. I don't think my boss has a 3-page resume, and she's done a lot more than I've done. You know, so just put the important information on there, the important internships, the important work experience that applies to what you want for that position that you're applying for at that particular time. And you can have multiple copies. Like as I interview throughout my history at my company, I have a operations resume, I have a sales resume, and I have a leadership management resume. And in today's technology, you can change that in 2 seconds. You have it saved to your iPad or laptop or whatever. You can change it and adjust it as you need it. So just keep that in mind. Any like extracurricular activities, you know, if you have that crazy GPA, even though it might not matter later in life in your work experience, put that thing on there. If you got that 4.0 or that 3.9 or whatever it is, and put it on there. You know, put the groups, especially like the leadership stuff, you know, your fraternities, sororities, or charities, or anything where you've organized anything or led an activity or something, put that in there, you know, as well. Make sure it's on there.
Yeah, my biggest thing is like the descriptions under your jobs. Like I know what a front desk agent does. Like for me, it's more of like make them bullet points. So the same thing, I've had someone turn in a 3-page resume to me because they gave me a whole like life story of what they did in those 3 months and stuff like that. And that's great, but that's what you're gonna talk about. I just want like quick points to see, and it gives me opportunity to ask you guys questions. But if you're like, oh, I was a server, I served 30 people in a day, like, oh, I kind of expect that on an 8-hour shift, hopefully. But like, give me points to like sell yourself a little bit more on it. And I think nowadays they're asking you like put like stats and things like that. Like talk about that. Like if you're going to sales, like, oh, obviously you're gonna talk to people because you're selling, but what's that rate? Like, what does that look like? Like, oh, when I worked in student housing, like, oh, I was able to sell 143 rooms out of 900. Like, those are like kind of bullet point things, but as a leasing agent, I expect you to lease. So like, don't go too long, don't make it 5 bullet points, like short and simple. We're gonna ask you questions. I will definitely ask you like, what did a day in your work shift look like? What did you do? How did you speak to this person? Things like that.
A lot of the experts say in a perfect world, you should have like 3 bullet points, and treat your resume kind of like when you do a PowerPoint presentation or whatever type of presentation you make. Like your presentation like this, you know, like as you've seen all the slides we've done, it's been bullet points for us to expand on. It hasn't been a description underneath each thing. Like we kind of expand on the bullet points. So just kind of think of your resume the same way, put like 3-4 bullet points on there, and then sell yourself when you're at that career expo or, you know, you're in that interview. That's what it's meant to do. It's like, just give a snippet of who you are and what you've done. You know, one other thing I'll mention, like under education, like if you've gotten any certifications or anything like that, you know, put that on there as well, because it's important to know. So like my company is doing the beverage certification program with you guys. Like if you're a student that's gone through that, you know, even though you might not be coming to work for us, but you might be looking at hotels or restaurants, put that on there. you know, you've done the work and you've earned it and it applies to what you're trying to do, make sure it's on there.
Another point that he just brought up for something like in hotels, right? Your property management system. Like that's a great easy bullet point to be like, oh, like Charles, I'm gonna pick on you now that I know you're here. Like he can put on his resume like, hey, I know opera. And like hotels will be like, oh my God, like we have opera, great. Things like that. Like in hotels, I will warn you guys, there is more than 10 property management systems. No two hotels. I could say for the most part, IHG uses the same one if you're jumping different IHG hotels, but like Marriott, no two Marriotts will have the same system. So you can put that like, oh, if you're in accounting, like if you used M3, that's an accounting system, like put that you've known that, like worked with that system, because that tells us like, oh, they did this, they worked on this, they know some like degree of this that helps you in your like interview process.
Some of the work experience too, you know, if you have something special you've done under work experience, you know, you can put that on there. I know sometimes, you know, like, you know, some hotels and, you know, restaurants do catering services, whether it's, you know, for weddings or special events. If you've bartended or catered that 1,000 event or 400 event, you know, just person event, just make sure you put that on there under that particular company. Use that as one of your bullet points, you know, because that lets them know, like, in addition to the normal night of having 30 tables, like you've worked a high stress, high energy, you know, high demand event of 300 people, 400 people. If you've worked a wedding, you know, as a server or, you know, a bartender or whatever, you know, put that on there. You know, put it under whatever company, you know, did the catering service. Put it on there, you know. Does anyone have any resume questions? Who wants to do my resume when I update? Me, Willie, come on. Nobody? Oh man, come on. You got time. I'm not looking for anything right now. So I love what I'm doing. So I'm not looking for anything new with my company right now. So you're stuck with me for like a couple more years of come and see you. Well, some of you won't see me, you know, more than another year from now because some of you are graduating soon, right? So no resume questions? Nobody? Everybody? So Dedman's done a great job. See, that's why we're FSU. There you go. Other schools, like, they might be coming to ask you guys questions, like, how do I do my resume? We're not Gainesville. We don't have to do that. My dad went there, so
Competition.
still forgiving him. So this is more, you know, more examples of, you know, this is more closer to what we were talking about as far as like the bullet points. I mean, you have the one that's like 5, but, you know, but for the most part, or 4, I should say, like 2 and, you know, 3, like I'd probably do a little bit more than 2. You know, you definitely want to do at least 3 or 4, but try to stay away from the 5 or 6 because then you're getting into, you know, the description of what you did. I can Google your job description and know what a server does or what a bartender does, but you want to put the key points, you know, like the operating systems and, you know, any, you know, events that you worked or any, you know, upskilling you did while you were there. You know, if you've done cross-training. You know, I know some places have, like, they do it with their bartender sometimes, where the bartender is, you know, also doubles as, like, maybe the closing manager sometimes. Put that on there. I don't care if you've only done it once. Put it on there. It's a conversation you can have with the person that's interviewing you, because they're going to ask. They're going to like, you're 22 and you were a closing manager? You're 21, you were a closing manager? And you can tell them, like, yeah, only be honest. And we mentioned that earlier. Yeah. Be honest, like, yeah, I did it once, I did it twice, but I got the experience, I know what it is, that type of thing.
Yeah, exactly what he's saying, like a key holder. I know that's the thing with bartenders, like if you're in charge of the liquor closet, like that's responsibility there. That's a lot of money that the hotel or restaurant's buying. Like for you to be responsible in that, or like inventory, something as small as inventory means a lot to like companies and like at the end of the month and stuff like that. So like if that's something you took part in, like that's a lot. That's a big responsibility for someone to trust you guys to do. So definitely mark that off, like things, tasks, jobs like that.
I know one of the places I hang out near my house, one of the servers, she's in the process, or bartender, she's in the process of graduating within a semester or 2. And she volunteers all the time when she closes to be the key holder because she wants to get that experience, because she wants to be able to put it on a resume and have like legitimate experience with that whole process with helping the closing manager and all that kind of stuff. So, make sure you're putting all those, that important information on there. That's a lot more important than putting a job description as one of your bullet points. So you got mail to send. So we've talked a little bit about some of this, a lot of it's protocol, right? So this whole slide, the do's and don'ts, and how do you want to be professional. We talked about this earlier. When you're sending any communication, we talked about letters of interest to let them know like you're interested in the position. So any of this communication, when you're leaving that voicemail, like if someone calls you back and you can't pick up the phone, make sure like you're leaving a professional. If you call them back and you don't get them and you get their voicemail, leave a professional voicemail. When you're sending that thank you letter, check your spelling, make sure it's professional, make sure it's proper. If you have to Google a template like this, and I'm sure you probably already have examples of what a proper thank you letter or follow-up letter looks like, just make sure it's, it's standard and it's professional, and you don't have to, it shouldn't be some long page of an email, and make sure it's an email. Don't try to mail anyone. I don't think anyone in here is going to mail anyone anything, but don't, make sure like you're emailing them. And this is another thing with when you're, communicating with anyone at a career expo or information session, is that you're getting their contact information and you're getting the proper person's contact information. So that way, when you are sending stuff out like this, even in an interview, when you're leaving an interview, ask that person again for their business card, or like I have my QR thing. So get their contact information so you're sending this to the right person. Because if I was interviewing you and you sent this email to my HR person and it's meant for me, who knows how long it might take for me to get it. So just make sure. And for me, like stuff like this is very important. This might make the choice between you moving on to the second round or you not moving to that second interview if that person doesn't get that follow-up or thank you email, because they might think you're not interested if they don't get an email from you.
Yeah, my thing is like there's definitely plenty of templates, so don't stress what you're writing and typing. All I do ask is like, be careful when you're like copy and pasting and sending multiples after the Career Expo and you've gone through 5 interviews, and make sure like you change the name on them, because it's happened before.
Please
where
change
like,
the name.
Thank you, Bob. And I'm like, well, I'm not Bob today, but thank you. And like, if you
Bob at the Hilton.
yeah, and if you can take an extra step, like personalize it a little bit. Like you have this template, it's an easy copy and paste. If you have Gmail, you can save it as a template, but just write something that stood out in the interview that made it more personal. Because again, it's something we both prefer to like, and we've seen so many of them, and you guys are like, oh, why would I send them if you're gonna get 10 other ones? But like, if you make the 1-minute effort to put that one sentence, like, oh, I enjoyed, thank you for explaining about holding keys, like, oh, you were engaging, that tells us like exactly that you were there with us.
And it could be something fun you talked about too in an interview, like a trip, or like, hey, we laughed about, this or that, it makes it personal, right? So it lets them know you're really passionate about the position and that it meant a lot. The interview meant a lot to you, as well. And, it says, be aware of, existing standards. Just like anything in life, standards do change. So just always be on top of, if there's a different type of email protocol or thank you letter protocol that we're using now, just make sure you're up to date on what that looks like, and that the contact information is correct, and you're reviewing it 2-3 times before you hit send. Because if you put Bob on there and you're sending it to Willie, that just lets me know you cut and paste it and you sent it to you sent the same exact thing to everybody. So if you do have a panel interview or a group interview where there's 2 or 3, I will tell you, when it comes to doing the follow-up stuff, personalize it and send it to each one of them individually. Do not put all 3 of their names on the same email and hit send. Send it to each one of them and change the name. Do not send it to them as a group email. Make it personal for each one of them. Does anyone have any questions on email? Anyone? Got that one too? Oh, man, Dedman's rocking, man. I love you guys. Oh, I might have to come back more often. Professional style. So this first one up here, I know a lot of people probably don't like to hear be conservative, but it doesn't mean, like it says, it doesn't mean you're boring. I mean, you never know who's interviewing you, right? So you have to realize that. So tone it down. You're looking for your opportunity to start your career, right? So if not wearing the bright shirt, and I almost did that today just to show you like what not to do, but I just changed my mind on doing it. And I also have this like Knowles like sports coat. You'll probably see it at the career fair. So don't wear that to an interview. Like I would never wear that to an interview, even though like some people in my company would laugh and would like it a lot, but I still would go dress in a conservative manner, and I've been with my company almost 19 years. So you just know that it doesn't mean you're boring. Like once you're in the door and they tell you you can do whatever, that's fine, but get the job first. So make the most out of your wardrobe. We kind of talked about this earlier too. Like we understand like you don't have a lot of money, but make the most out of what you have. And when we break out into groups, we'll talk about this a little bit more as far as, buy that if you're a guy, buy 2 shirts. You might only have 1 suit, but buy 2 or 3 cheap shirts, 2 or 3 different ties, and make the most out of that suit.
Girls, staple blazer. You don't need 10 blazers, I promise you. I probably wear, and Allison's also in here, she could tell you how many times I wear my blazer. It sits on my desk. But like that one blazer that goes with everything, that's staple, obviously dry clean it and stuff like that, but you do not need 10 of different patterns. It looks fun, it's great, it does not do great in your pocket or in your outfit, but like that one blazer goes with all 10 of my pants, all 12 of my tops, and it just goes. It is fine. Shoes are the same way. Don't go spending like, oh, I'm gonna buy these great flats. I go through flats every 3 months. I am buying shoes every 3 months, especially if you're working hotel operations. So like, yes, you wanna look super nice, but you can make nice look great. So don't even worry about that. Get that one good piece that's gonna last you and change it up.
Like I'll be back in a couple of weeks or so, and we will also be interviewing for our, internships or whatever, hopefully at that point. But I'm not I'll probably be here for 2-3 days. I'm not bringing 3 different suits. I will probably bring 3 different shirts and, but I'm not bringing 3 different suits. I'm not packing all that. So it's being flexible, knowing your wardrobe and making the most out of it. And you don't always have to spend a lot of money to look nice. I know all of you are on a budget, you're in college, so just be very aware of that. And the one thing the internet allows you to do today is shop for deals, and because of Amazon, you can get stuff like the next day. Know the culture of the company. We touched on that, with the conservative doesn't mean boring. This is when you have an opportunity to find out the culture of the company on how you should dress, but you still should dress your normal professional interview style with your, and then learn about the culture once you're in the interview. Now, if they tell you something different when you show up for the second interview, then dress that way. But when you go for that first interview, dress the way you should dress in a professional manner, and then you can find out the culture of that company. And when you're doing your research, you're going to find out about the culture of the company to see if that's a fit for you. Because if it's a company where you have to wear a suit all day and you're not a suit person, you probably shouldn't waste their time or your time going through the interview process. Make sure your wardrobe fits your body and your personality. Yeah, just make sure your clothes fit. I know a lot of, for guys with the suits, a lot of the off-the-rack stuff doesn't always fit you perfectly because all of our body types are different, But some places, to get things, tailored or whatever, sometimes it's only like $5, $6, $7 to, get the pants leg to fit the way you want, or get the jacket to fit in the shoulders, because if you're a guy that buys something off the rack and you have broad shoulders, you might end up, it might end up, your jacket sleeve might end up being up here versus, at the wrist or whatever. So just make sure your clothes fit, they're not tight fitting to where you're uncomfortable. If you have that suit that you haven't worn since your freshman year and things have changed with your body by the time you get to your senior year, you might want to get a different suit or, get it tailored or something, because you want to be comfortable when you sit in your interview, right? You don't want to be like, oh man, my jacket, if I turn this way, it might split down the middle. You don't want to do that, right? So you want to feel comfortable when you interview. So is this when we're breaking out?
Up. We're going to go with a yes.
Where'd she go? Yeah, I think
she's
we're
sitting back there.
Okay. Is this? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we're breaking it into groups here.
So ladies could come over here.
With Lena and guys over here. So basically we're going to answer if you have any of these questions. So we're going to unmic ourselves, but if you have any questions about anything with dress, or if you have any additional one.